back. Thank you. As I indicated yesterday, first we're going to start with questions concerning the integration of renewable energy into the transmission planning process and construction process. Then we'll have questions on the vegetation management contracts. And of course, cross-examination or redirect on those. And then we will return to the agenda where we will be starting with the category that's entitled Enabling, and then on to Support Services. And that is my hope for today. So good luck to everybody. First, we have two new panelists whom I want to swear in. Mr. Judd, Ms. Bailey, would you stand, please? Raise your right hand. Okay. One moment, please. Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth? You're sworn in. Good morning. Mr. Schiffman will start the questions in this area, and then I will complete them. Mr. Schiffman, good morning.
Good morning. As Mr. Hempling had indicated, we have a few questions related to the transmission upgrade, both in the budget and then just in general about the process that LUMA is going through for both planning for and building out the system to integrate renewable generation into the system. I think on Wednesday we talked about the priority stabilization plan, and LUMA had indicated in response to some questions that pretty much the transmission projects that have been cited in the PSP for, the ones that had outages have been completed. But the PSP order also directed, it had a timeline for really the interconnection of the Tranche 1 renewable resource projects in it as well. So I wanted to get an understanding of where the status of those projects is.
So this is Pedro Melendez again. Good morning, everyone. So several of them are moving forward. Some of them are in the construction. Some of them are being energized. We have one in the Salinas area where a switching station got built that is part of that initial projects that are being through the process. There's a significant amount of them that have contracts already completed through the entire process commercially to be able to move into the execution. In regards to RUMO's role and the planning on those projects, we have completed all the planning studies through the interconnection, I'll call it interconnection process, to ensure that any facility upgrades as applicable get addressed. A lot of the early projects were studied to determine whether or not something else was needed. A lot of these facilities were existing. So those are where I'll call it much simpler to interconnect. So those are kind of the overall high level updates on these projects. Several of them had some delays in regards to the phases and where they were at, or additional scope that was identified after the system study, facility studies, and interconnection studies were completed.
And then I think in an order issued by PREP during the Tranche 1 process, LUMA was directed for network upgrade costs associated with the Tranche 1 projects. It was directed to seek federal funding. Are you aware of that direction?
Yes, I am aware of that direction.
And can you give me an idea of where that project stands?
Don't have it in front of me, but if we can, I think this was a question asked on the level of projects. That project has been moved through the process and initiated. I could give you more details in regards to that phases. As you all were aware, every project gets submitted has to go through a review and approval, but the detailed scope of work has been already submitted for them.
But that's not been obligated at that point, at this point?
To my knowledge, at this moment, no.
And does that mean that does that mean the physical project is on hold until that funding, or what's the status?
I would say the project is on hold. That is not an accurate statement. When I say the project design, we do have design dollars to be able to execute the design. We have dollars to execute any procurement. When the project overall gets obligated, then we get the construction pieces to be able to be executed. So we're moving things in parallel. We're not waiting on moving forward because we understand the order that is present. The additional funds to be able to cover the construction and the obligation when it occurs, then we'll move it through it. During the FEMA process, this might help you a little bit. Luma has access to what is called A&E, architectural and engineering firms dollars,
Yes.
to perform engineering work before even the project gets a specific number assigned. So we do leverage that to advance this project through the pipeline.
So given the activities that have been done and the, I guess, expectation on obligation or getting the funds, what's the schedule for implementation of the project, for actually making the construction activities?
There are several projects, so I don't have the schedules memorized, so I'm going to have to
Just generally.
So they are being actually executed this year. There are several that are in the pipeline right now, the next one next year. So between the next 18 months, you're going to see all these projects coming through the pipeline, particularly the ones at the early stages.
So the projects will be able to get interconnected.
That is correct. If I may, this might give you a little bit more of a sense of the significance of one of them. We built a switching station in the south side of the island that once we connect the first customer is also enabling connecting other projects that are coming through that because it was already built. So we have done a lot of that work. Very, very typical of what is done on the mainland, in which all the project gets built at once and then you continue interconnecting that project gets completed. That happened on Friday, in which we energized part of the switching station as part of the execution. The project has not gone commercial, right, COD, but we were able to successfully complete the interconnection. There are some facilitation activities that Luma has done, what is called I'll call it temporary pole structures, temporary things to allow for some of the testing. So our effort and commitment has always been to enable the interconnection of these projects fully and ensure they meet the standards and codes and the requirements established by the order and established by Luma interconnection.
So the timing of the network upgrades is there any disconnect between, I guess, when the network upgrade projects would be completed as opposed to when the interconnection would be completed and the projects would be energized?
I think if you're seeking the challenges that we're facing to ensure that they align, is that what you're, yeah, there are a few projects that do have some challenges that we're working with the developers to find solutions to ensure they can meet the timelines that they need to be in commercial operations. But that is, again, contingent to the execution of the transmission upgrades or the service upgrades that we have. And that is coordinated with the different projects in my organization.
But are those challenges on the interconnection side or on the network side?
I think some of them is on the network side, mostly on network operate. So we're looking for ways to ensure that they can be intertied. Some projects may have, and I say may because there's a large spectrum of them. For the tranche ones, this is the least, we have it very well defined already in where they are in the phases. There are several others that are either ahead or right behind that we're working through the process.
And then just generally, can you describe what expenditures are budgeted for these activities in the proposed budget?
When you say generally, what?
Well, I mean, are there specific project expenditures in this budget or is it the federal funded aspect for the network upgrade?
So that's what I was going to refer to. In the overall filing, we do have some allocations of dollars in the federal side, but also in the non-federal side to accelerate the projects. The answer is yes, there are some dollars. I don't know on top of mind how much of that, because some upgrades are related to substation equipment. Some of them has to do with line and capacity that we're planning for. Others for reconfiguration of the system to bring in out of service equipment in service that are part of the overall plans. So what I'll help you with responding to your question, as a benefit of bringing the out of service equipment back online does enable access and capacity, access to new capacity coming into the system for these projects. So it's I'll call it multi-value type of project. So that those are included in the overall plan and the planning that we've done for this year.
Okay. And then a similar line of questioning for the tranche 2 network upgrades, which I think I'm not aware that there was a direction for federal funding of the Tranche 2 network upgrades, but if you could give me a sense of where those upgrades stand.
There are a lot of these are in the planning stages of determining the needs for them, and they all call it the engineering phase. There are three main phases. We do system impact studies, facility studies, and interconnection studies that we evaluate for these assets. That helps inform that the developer of a particular project what cost is I'll call it assigned to their project versus what LUMA has responsibility to inform them to be able to determine how the best path forward for them. We're also exploring the ways on how the work will be completed. We're open to allow for combining the work and ensuring that we can have the similar contracts, particularly in the non-federal capital, so we can maximize the use of those resources, including also having them build it to LUMA specs, which we have done in other cases. So those are the things. That's the kind of the phase for those. I'll call it Tranche 2. They are in different stages, so it's a little hard. Some of them we don't have a contract itself to be able to have the funds pre-allocated and defined. So we're navigating through some of those, but nonetheless, we are doing the studies. We are doing the identification of the needs. We're doing some pre-engineering to facilitate interconnection.
And then for any related network upgrade costs or network upgrade projects, that's a similar process, or where do
That's the similar. Everything I'm saying applies to both your questions. The one associated with the interconnection facility and also the networks upgrades associated with it. I want to reemphasize a comment I made to your prior question, that as we bring the out of service equipment online, there are going to be upgrades associated with that, which is going to provide then value to these projects. Those are on the list of priority projects that we have on our plan.
When you say upgrades, you mean you're going to bring them in at like with a conductor or project that in addition to bringing it back into service? Is that what you mean by that?
That is correct. That's what I mean with that. Not only that, we have protection and control equipment to be able to monitor and control and protect the system from events that actually also need to be upgraded to newer technology, because it has to be integrated with the project. So we are preparing the system for that integration. The same with SCADA systems. These systems that they get interconnected to our facilities, they need to be added to our control center. So we are basically repositioning or preparing our system for those projects. Another example I could give you, I mentioned it the day before yesterday, had to do with transformer replacements. One of them, like Costa Sur, happens to be one of the transformers that currently was factory acceptance tested in Mexico that we're bringing into island. That is going to facilitate some of the projects that are on the southwest portion of the system. And also it will allow for the access and addressing some of the loadability issues that we're having in the 115 and voltage issues that we're having in both on the southwest and southeast of the island, as we're integrating a lot of those resources on that part of the system. We also have on the north side, northwest part of the island, we have several projects in that area. So we're in concert doing these upgrades to ensure all of them get the access to our transmission network.
Yeah, so that leads into kind of my next line of questioning, I guess, in terms of, there's, quite a substantial amount of capital on both the transmission and the distribution side in the budget. And, I think a lot of the testimony this week focused on, this prioritization issue in terms of, near-term reliability needs that need to be addressed. And then there's also, the longer-term, I guess, development or identification of projects, and, part of which is federally funded, part of which is not. But can you describe just in general, given the need for, the expectation or need for integrating a lot of renewable resources, battery energy storage resources onto the system, when LUMA is developing projects, the engineering and the planning, how are you taking into account, the future need to, because one thing is just maintaining reliability, right?
Yep.
but the other part is building the system out so that it's ready or more ready than it has been for integrating the renewables that are expected to come.
That is a great question and very much appreciated, by the way, because that's a very important element of ensuring you're building for long term. So we depart from the premises of using the transmission planning NERC standards as our minimum requirements, which allows to the very thing that you're referring to, in which we do long-term analysis of what the potential projects are going to be, where projects might come into play. We have what I call it a pipeline of identifying prospectus projects. They are added and studied as they come in through the modeling tools. The modeling system, we do a long-term modeling of the system's needs to ensure that as these resources are coming into play, that we do a static and dynamic studies to make sure that the integration of these resources do not affect, or we can pre-identify potential issues, we'll call it violations, and not violations in the context of the law. It's just violations to a study of its threshold, right? Just for the folks that are here that are in the legal side. So we analyze whether or not those limits are being challenged, and then that defines the long-term plan. Those projects do exist. I will further add, recently there was a filing of the integrated resource plan that also provides us called a compass on the direction based on the laws, and those are accounted for up to a certain point because of the level of certainty, particularly when we're talking about what changes are being made. They are also incorporated. The filing that you have in front of you accounts for the needs to bring reliability, and there's a study that is going to be finalized on file next week. Looking at my regulatory team, they're not here, but we have a filing associated with what else will need to be done for expanding the system as a result of the IRP. So it's a balance between the two studies. We utilize the NERC, as I mentioned, the NERC transmission planning criteria that allows us to assess the loss of elements in the system, the uncontrolled separation, cascading possibilities that exist, what configuration the system needs to have, N-1 conditions, which we have a lot of those situations in Puerto Rico that are not being met. The system was not designed with that philosophy at the onset. So its configuration doesn't meet a lot of these criteria. The intent through this process is to identify the one that has the most value, that provides access with the highest certainty, and start planning and investing on them.
When you say long-term, like what specific years are you studying, say, in a power flow model?
Great questions. So we're using there are two time frames that we're assessing. So I'm going to give you a high-level view of them. So the integrated resource plan has a no further additions or additions that are known between now and 2032. Mm-hmm. So we're using that as I'll call it a point in time. Then we do the 10-year, and then we'll do the 20 years, right? We try to make sure that we have that window of time to match up the time frame that the IRP and indicating what's going to happen in the future. We also updating our modeling tools and capabilities for PSSC modeling, which you're familiar with. You asked me a couple of times to ensure that the tools are able to be studied and provide its real values of it. One of the biggest challenges we continue facing is having detailed data of our generation resources, the ability to ramp, the ability to respond to the system. We don't have that in the model, so we're working with the generator operator to ensure we have that technical data to be able to appropriately determine how the system behaves when you actually have dynamic events, right? And the dynamic modeling. That is one of the biggest challenges for us to determine whether or not the system has either enough capacity from a transfer capacity from the north to the south, from the south to the north, and from the west to the east, which is where our load is. Our load profile has not changed significantly, but we're seeing a lot of the renewable distributed area resources being added to the system, which makes the actual transfer capability of the system more complex. So that's a full way of how we are managing this. The renewable careful with the word I'm going to use. The additional renewable resources from the distributed energy resources, we have installed about 1,000 megawatts in the system already. has created some challenges from our modeling to understand what is the behavior of the system.
Can you describe just generally, what are the primary limitations that are affecting it in terms of, are they thermal constraints? Is it stability? Is it voltage? Is it
All three.
vary by location?
All three, and I wouldn't say vary by location because this is an island. It's a very condensed system, has allowed over 2,500 miles of transmission network to get to the load, but it is very condensed. There is a lot of, from the topology of the system that is in the metro area, there is a lot of congestion that is happening as a result of equipment being out of service. I'll give you an example. We just transported a 544 MVA transformer into Savannah Llana, which is on the, what I'll call, if you look at the San Juan area, there's Carolina, where is the airport, just to figure that, right? Imagine a Y in the entire system. The generations in the south, so that point did not have a 544 MVA transformer since 2018, if I'm not mistaken. So that transformer just came to island. It's going to facilitate a lot of stability to in serving a lot of the customers directly and indirectly. Those are the challenges that we're facing because we're modeling the current state, and being able to determine those future years is going to be contingent to whether or not these transformers that are out of service are put online. We recover from that, so there's stability to the system. The generation fleet gets the necessary updates to ensure the ramp rates are capable of doing what they need to do as we continue adding renewable resources to the system. And you understand when we're talking about the minimum loads, right, and the minimum capacity, it is very difficult for this system to continue having intermittent resources added and try to have spinning reserve and creating momentum inertia on the system. So it's a real challenge. Having more technical data, more studies is going to help us, and having more certainty on these projects is going to help be able to ascertain your question of thermal. Yes, we have issues. Voltage. Yes, we have issues. Transfer capabilities. Yes, we have issues. Ascertaining where to put the dollars is continue being part of our day-to-day modeling and studies.
And then, to what extent are you studying, I guess, strategic deployment of battery resources, for example, to deal with some of those, so those, say, the minimum generation issues that you're discussing in terms of being able to handle those, with in a more integrated fashion?
Great question. There are several projects that are being added to the fleet that are being used for ancillary services and resources that are part of the pipeline of projects that have been approved, particularly with battery systems, because they do provide that flexibility now with the newer technology. They are more complex in some cases to be able to integrate because they have to be designed for the application. And we are working with several developers on that. I think there are some projects that are with Genera that we have been coordinated for quite some time in that regard, and that is actually incorporated in our planning studies. I'll also share that the planning is a centralized function within our organization for a group of teammates that handle both transmission and also distribution. So it's a coordinated, integrated system planning that we continue working from. But all the projects, there's a pipeline of projects as well that they are adding batteries to existing solar projects that also helping the process. In some cases, it all depends how the contract is set, which right? And whether or not these are being used for smoothing, they're using for peaking, or they're using to manage reserve. So it is, when you talk about the battery storage into transmission to facilitate operations, there's a lot of details that need to be worked out. But they all being part of the process. There is a pipeline of projects suggested that are being evaluated. As we know, when they come commercial, which ones go through the process, we'll continue then doing those refinements on an annual basis.
But for the projects that you're talking about, the specific battery project, are those being developed and you're studying them and the impact, or is the transmission study driving the development of the battery?
We're not. If your question, are you talking about proactive planning for them? Is that?
Are you trying to identify battery solutions to address transmission issues? Is what I'm trying to understand.
Okay, that's a great question. We're using the pipeline of projects that exist, or proposals that exist, as a means to determine how that can solve the overall issue. Having a pre-positioning to determine where to best place batteries. We've done that for 4 projects that are called the 4x25 that I recently spoke about in 4 different locations across the system. Those are primarily, I'll say, assisting with our voltage excursions and deploying them fast from a fast acting resource, not necessarily fully capacity planning. But we have done those 4 that LUMA is actually executing on. The other ones, yes, they're being worked with the developers. Your second part of your question was a proactive planning for LUMA to determine where to place them. We are under the current regulations in which the renewable transition targets goals that exist that help us understand directionally where we're at. Where are we in that process? We're not as mature as I believe we should be. That's just to be very sincere. We don't have enough evolution in that long-term planning process here on island to be able to speak with certainty on how well are we doing with that. And I'll close with this for your question, because I think what you're looking for, you're talking about location. It is a very challenge siting new facilities in Puerto Rico because of space and the access to be able to deploy them. We do have a lot of projects in the southwest portion of the island in which we're trying to coordinate work with Genera on ensuring projects and facilities that have transmission substations. There's additional land that we can actually co-locate assets. All those type of projects are being actually considered and put through the process.
Thank you. And then just with respect again to the specific issue of integrating renewables and specific projects in I guess future tranche type processes. Can you the fact that the transmission system is pretty dynamic. There's all of this investment coming.
Mm-hmm.
There's the battery projects you're talking about. There's the tranche 1, 2 projects. When you study a particular, the interconnection of, say, a future project, or if a project showed up tomorrow, how do you decide what's in the power flow study, what's not in the power flow study, when you're basically trying to study, both the interconnection and particularly the network upgrade aspect of that?
That is a great question, and I'm going to refer you back to the practices that are used for NERC. Also for the RTOs, the regional transmission operators like MISO, PJM, we're trying to build a queue to understand certainty of projects to be able to determine how to BS studies. That is not well established on island, but that's the practice we're trying to follow, in which, depending on the state of a particular project and the commercial viability of the project, that is managed between the operations team and my team, then we build certainty on what to put in, when to remove it, and then we analyze them in both conditions, whether the project is in, the project is out. So we have that, I'll call it iteration. As you know, the transmission planning uses a statistical modeling. Sorry, I don't want to use those words because I don't want to lose the team. That requires a dynamic evaluation of location, type of facility, type of capacity, that is more detailed than sometimes it exists in a particular project. It is a challenge. It's a challenge to be able to have that certainty. There's not a structural process to determine what goes into the pipeline of additional resources on the island.
Right, but you talked earlier, I think you said a 2032 power flow data, for example, and then you said longer term, which I assume for interconnection, you're not using the longer term ones.
Yeah, that's correct.
But for the 2032 data set, for example, are all of the transmission projects that are in this budget, for example, for fiscal year 26, 27, 28, are those all included and assumed to be commercial in that data set?
So long that the project is being approved and go through the process from prep and they're considered approved and necessary for tranches. And I'm going to go backwards, right? For the tranches themselves, the answer is yes, right? Anything that we know in the pipeline in the near term that is actually already a known project is included. We have projects that are in, I'll call it prospective spaces that we have considered for evaluation. But from actual determining what are the needs of the system, the ones with the highest affected by PrEP to be addressed or right.
The Trend Fund resources were studied for interconnection. You're saying that those projects were all included, all of the.
They are accounted for, yes. So long the location is defined to determine whether or not new facilities are needed.
And then even with that level of investment, there's still substantial network upgrade requirements.
There is likely, yes, beyond that.
You're familiar with the Energisa project?
I am familiar with the Energisa project, yes.
And is there an expectation of where that is likely to get sited or connected, or is that still under study?
When you set an expectations, I will have to defer in that part of it because at the end, in the end, that the specific commercial dates I cannot speak to it, but we're using the data that we know with the information that have been given us. My understanding of the status of the project that the capacity was updated from an original size that was cited or discussed or approved. So we're studying the scenarios associated with that addition. That is timing of that project will define it when the upgrades or what type of upgrades will be needed in regards to the expansion of the projects. That is where we are with that particular Energisa project.
But has a site been determined, or that's still being evaluated in terms of where it's likely to get connected?
No, it has been determined what is likely to be connected on the north side and where it's coming into. We don't have enough detail. I cannot speak. I'm speaking to what I know, right? So please just.
That's all we want.
That's. I just want to make sure. We do have where is it going to be interconnected, and we're studying it. That's your question.
So you're still evaluating the transmission impacts of
that? That is correct. And we have determined the impacts. Well, what we have not been able to ascertain is the facilities impact study, which you understand what I'm referring to. One thing is do the system impact, and the other one is do the full facility studies and understand the dynamic of that resource when it gets added. Because we don't have enough details on the type of resources that are going to be doing. And when I'm saying that, I'm referring to the type of machine, the type of modeling is going to be needed, the size, the capacity that are essential to determine the dynamic of that resource in the system to determine what additional impacts it may have to the facilities when it's get integrated. That level of detail it's not, to my knowledge, we do not have.
And you need that project to advance, I guess, in development before you'll have that level of detail?
Yes, I will say yes. It is in the development project, so yes, it will have to.
What the hell? I'm talking. Siri that's doing that, sorry. And we talked a little bit earlier, the questions about whether, you're doing, I guess, dynamic type studies to identify battery storage opportunities for like on the transmission side. Is there an expectation, like in your group or in LUMA, when you would be doing those types of studies, advancing your planning to the stage that you would be looking for those types of solutions to transmission issues as opposed to, citing projects that are already being developed?
So it's a great question. I'm gonna qualify my answer before I go through it. Do I have an expectation in my organization as to when we'll get to that? The answer is yes to that question. Do we have an expectation as from a regulator and all the other pieces of the process to be able to do it? I cannot answer that piece in regards to how the system will evolve, because we actually have to have some level of guardrails. So where we're going to spend our time and effort and resources. I believe that once we have moved through the phases of evolving the team and the modeling certainty that we have with the dynamics of the system, and I'm going to be very specific on what I mean, which is understanding the existing capabilities of the units that are running and their availability of them and what they're capable of doing to be able to have technical data modeling. If we are unable to have that information, the dynamic studies that we have to do are not going to render the right output. Right? So we are in that phase. Once we have that level of detail and confidence level that we need, we will then continue studying the additional projects and then moving to the phase of what are the best additional solutions from a battery storage. And it doesn't have to be only battery, I'll say. There are many different other resources that should be added to the island. I just want to be very clear and specific. I believe we cannot think that the system behaviors, particularly on an island that serves a peak of around 3,000 megawatts, that has a minimum right now around 1,200 megawatts when is during the day due to the solar, that the dynamic ramping of the system could be because we're a night peaking other places of island. The ramp rate significance. You need a significant means to be a system to rapidly respond to the ramp rates that we're facing in Puerto Rico. That needs to be handled so we don't continue having what we are today. We do not have enough reserves in our system to be able to even overcome that. So the starting point of the system from a dynamic of the transmission and operations is very, very challenging. And we are working, when I say we are working, is we have the right people in our organization to do this modeling from expertise. Is a continuous evolution of getting the details from the systems and having clear direction of what are the best resources that are going to be added to the island from a technical perspective.
Under the OMA, LUMA has the planning function, right?
LUMA has a planning function, the TND, or integrating the planning of the system. That is correct.
And you talked about guardrails. Can you expound on that? You're being limited somehow from doing
No, when I say guardrails, I refer to, and I'm going to get a little bit outside of what I call it my sandbox, if I may, well, just to answer your question, right? There is a public policy that drives where are we heading in regards to being 100% renewable. And please, respect to the team, this is not I will integrate any resources. That determines our north, and then we have to have a glide path to get to it. To be able to do that, we have to study. And as a public policy changes, then so change the portfolio in the direction we technically will have to go. That's the level of guardrails that I'm making reference to. And also ensuring that there is a structural process, particularly from unsolicited proposals, evaluations, that they all send them to the right channels, and there is a way of, I'll call it incoming, that particular process, I'll call it, on how that is, I'll call it regulated or processed through or decided upon, is not entirely in our hands. We have to coordinate all this work, and we have a role to play. I'm not disagreeing with it, but we don't play all the roles. So we need other entities to be able to do theirs to continue doing that. So that's what I'm referring to when talking about guardrails as to what it's going to look like. From an integrated system planning perspective, to finalize what I'm referring to, having a clear understanding on the three main components. What are our sustainability goals, right, to ensure we have a clarity on it. What is our reliability and specific goals that we're trying to achieve, and affordability goals that we're trying to balance on all these. These three things are key to understand the direction of the entire energy footprint in Puerto Rico.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I have, Mr. Hamplin.
Thank you, Mr. Schussman. Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning, panelists.
Morning.
My colleagues and I have designed these questions to be mostly yes or no, as opposed to essay. CC, we'll do the best we can, but I'm going to ask you to try to keep your answers short, and we'll see how it goes. Thank you, and welcome both of you. So are you familiar with the expert report that Ms. Bailey and Mr. Judd delivered concerning integrating renewable energy with the transmission planning process? Which one of you are going to address that?
Yes.
That'll be you, Mr. Melendez?
Yep.
Okay. Let me walk you through what I hope will be a short list of questions and see how we do. First, concerning the transmission facilities that you're either building or restoring today, what's the likely sort of weighted average length of their service lives? Is there a general answer you can give?
Yeah, that's just, you can use 30, 40 years depending on the components, right? Because depending by
Okay,
component, but
that's all.
30 to 40 years.
Well beyond 2050.
Um,
Well beyond 2050.
oh, when you say expected remaining life or the expected life of the asset?
Well, let's talk about remaining for the ones that you're working on.
Oh, the majority of the system is beyond that expected lifespan.
That's
So,
the question.
yeah, there's, okay, sorry.
Okay. Sorry for my not being clear. So let's focus on the facilities that you're doing the federally funded restorations. Do you have that in mind?
Yes.
Okay. And suppose you were to expand the restored facilities to accommodate the output of future renewables that we have to get on the system to meet the 2050 requirement. Do you have that in mind?
Yes.
Okay. And are the federal funds available for that type of expansion to accommodate the additional renewables? Do you know?
I don't.
Okay. Let's see if we can think about that between now and federal funds day. How's that? Is that okay, sir?
You asked for a yes or no?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and I appreciate that. But let's make a note, see what we can learn about that
Yep.
between now and that next panel. Thank you. And I take it, I gather from the conversation you just had with Mr. Schiffman that the transmission lines that you're rebuilding are designed to meet NERC standards.
The ones that we're designing, we are working towards that. Is that your question, sir? The ones that
Are you designing them to meet NERC standards?
we're using the design requirements to do that. Yes.
If this is repetitive of what you just talked about with Mr. Schiffman, I apologize. For the federally funded rebuild projects, do those projects include the additional capacity necessary to meet the 2050 requirement? Do you know?
I might have to say more than yes or no on this one, if that's okay.
Please.
Yeah.
And thank you for asking. You have my permission.
As a result of the expansions, as a result of the implementation of upgrades that we're doing for a federally funded project, we will indeed ensure that there's additional access capacity, because we will be able to identify a replacement of a conductor as an example, and we're not going to install the like for like. We know that we have to upgrade, and so yes, for that, in which you will have additional capacity in the system for a particular line when you are using a federal fund project rebuild.
So very specifically, does that additional capacity reflect specific expectations about the addition of renewable energy to satisfy the 2050 requirement? Do you know?
The answer will be, when you say a specific requirement, I want to pull back, is while we're using the NERC guiding principles, you indeed will get that level of additional access. The specificity of it depend again to the questions that was asked of me technically, the location of the resource, where is it at? And those are, it's not a one answer, right? It varies on that, but like the most likely scenario that when we are doing a project and we have knowledge that additional capacity is going to be acquired, we will study it. I'm going to educate you on something very quickly, if I may. We have to be careful building a facility that will be underutilized when you build it.
We'd have to pay for something, get no value from it. I've got you.
Okay, just point out,
Yep.
I'm just speaking specifically, been doing this for 25 years. We had some projects that I've worked in my career in which we're building a project for which is only used 1/4 of the time.
Here's what, are you finished? Yeah, here's what I'm getting from your answer in our dialogue. So you referred to the fact that you, in the restoration projects, are adding capacity, correct?
Yeah.
And then I asked you to be specific about whether the additional capacity that we're talking about is specifically designed to accommodate the growth that we need to have to satisfy the 2050 mandate, yes?
Yes.
And then I think what I understood from your answer is there's only so much specificity that you can promise because you don't know the specific projects or their locations that are going to be necessary to meet the 2050 project mandate, and you're concerned about overbuilding in a particular place and then having it just sit there while people have to pay for it and get no value from it. Is that roughly what you were trying to get across?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so so that's kind of a problem, though, isn't it? I guess for both of us, that we are going to be unable to be very specific about matching the capacity increase to the specific needs of the 2050 mandate. That's what we're both saying. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
All right. Well, thank you for that. It's not easy, is it?
It's not easy. It requires a lot of collaboration and a lot of decisions that need to be made, and that's what LUMA has the capabilities to be able to do this work.
So here's a dumb lawyer's question. I have a lot of those, but knowing that you're not going to be able to plan this additional capacity with the specificity that would require perfect knowledge of the future, what's the plan for building in adding capacity later when it turns out to be necessary without overspending at that time? Is there anything in the playbook about how to deal with this uncertainty? Yes, ma'am. Is there an objection?
Objection as to relevance. This type of planning scenarios are discussed in the IRP. I state that for the record.
All right. Well, it's relevant here because we want to minimize total costs, not just in the short term of this rate case, but in the long term of the next rate case. Can you give a shot at the answer?
Oh, absolutely, can give a shot on the answer, recognizing what is being raised, that some of this information is going to be provided to the IRP studies in regards to how to achieve that. I will answer your question, sir, in regards to capacity itself. It's a technical term, right? In regards to capacity, the ability for that exists physically for something to go through, right? Just to keep it very simple, imagine a water line and you're building a capacity that water can flow through it as much as we need to per minute, right? That's pretty much what just to conceptualize it for you. When you overbuild capacity, you underutilize the asset, you're making investments you don't know you're going to utilize. However, there is a degree of planning and engineering longer term in which you do provide some level of capacity availability in a system to be able to work with when you are making an upgrade. When we are using this deterministic modeling to determine a project, because it's a deterministic modeling tool, it will give you what is called the most valuable project at the least cost for the scenarios input that you put in. Our input into the process is going to have some level of capacity expansion capability in it without overbuilding it, but yet recognizing that the system will continue changing and it will continue growing. So that is what I'm referring to, that we can build into it when we're selecting a particular component, because it will provide what is called the flexibility and the range. That is how actually all the regional transmission planning processes happen in the mainland at a larger scale. Well, we're doing it and applying those best practices and principles on how we are defining the grid in Puerto Rico, because at the end of the day, it's going to be operated and paid by ratepayers.
I think basically you're saying back to me what I said back to you, is that there's a set of tools for dealing with this inherent uncertainty. And frankly, it's a problem that goes on in the mainland as well. They also have statutory mandates far off in the future for which they have to do some kind of planning.
That is correct.
All right. Thank you. If you have to do upgrading or retrofitting of transmission lines or substations after this initial restoration period, as you learn more about what's going to be needed to meet the 2050 mandate, that's a new set of costs later on, correct?
Yes.
And examples of those costs would be the permitting process?
Permitting process, right-of-way acquisition.
I was going to give you the list, but I thought maybe I could do it faster, but you talk even faster than I do. Taking a substation out of service in order to get the construction done, is that another example of a cost?
It's likely.
Yeah, and redeployment of construction crews.
Yes.
Long list, huh? Travel expenses to bring in the crews.
Yes.
Equipment shipping expense.
Yes.
Okay, anything else I've left out?
Engineering.
Aha, you're the engineer.
Right.
Yeah,
I still have a job.
yeah. We have to get you paid. And what else, sir?
Equipment that needs to be purchased.
Anything else?
Land that needs to be purchased.
Yes.
I believe you said environmental impact.
No, but you said it. Good. Anything else?
That's a very important element of it.
Analyzing the environmental impact that is specific to the particular capacity increase that you're talking about.
And the areas that you're disturbing. The areas that you're disturbing to be able to do that. An example, and if you were to build something on Guanica, it's a Superfund area, and it has a lot of additional regulations, and they should have. You have historical preservation laws that you have to ensure you abide to. You have a wetlands that you're going to be impacted. You shall have a mitigation for wetlands. when you are actually executing a project. So the list go on, but hopefully that gives you a context of the complexity.
It does. And by the way, just to go backwards for a second, when we talk about the risk of building overcapacity, one must compare that risk of building overcapacity with these extra costs that would have to incur later if we had to redo the thinking.
It's part of what you just stated, sir, is part of the exercises that we have to evaluate to understand that risk and the cost associated with doing it now, doing it later.
Okay.
And if I may add,
Please.
You raised a point on regulatory mandates or state mandates. And I'll use an example. One of my time in Michigan in the 2005 to 2012, those 7 years, we received a mandate and we actually built transmission to 345 kV over 500 miles across the entire loop of Michigan in anticipation of additional resources from renewable resources added to the state of Michigan, because it was a capacity determined that it was going to need it. Then that was done ahead of time. Now that it's rendering value. So it's a matter of those decisions aligning with the needs for the infrastructure. I'm using that as an example of a viability of it. The project was done. The project has been valuable. The project continues expanding, and it's providing access to reliable energy and saving dollars to ratepayers.
So the point that I wanted to make sure we understood each other on is that when you are assessing the risk of overbuilding in anticipation of future renewable energy, you are taking into account these later costs that we would have to incur if we didn't build the capacity ahead of time. That's what I understood.
That is correct, because when I built it in 2005.
You don't have to add. I just want to make sure we're understanding each other. Thank you. Remember, you have a very adept counsel, and if she thinks you and I have left something out, she'll be sure to do that, and she does it very efficiently. Okay? Are you familiar with this, with the phrase renewable energy hubs?
Yes, phrase, yes.
That's a phrase that you use, I think, that Luma uses.
Yes, Luma uses.
Right,
when say you, I struggle with it because I don't use it often, but yes.
What's your understanding of that concept?
I think it's easy when you talk about logistics. I use an example, and the context is you bring all the resources into one facility, into access point, into the grid, and that's a hub, right? You bring various projects into it.
Is there something unique about a renewable energy hub?
No, it's not unique.
Okay. So, believe me, I'm not the engineer here, but substations, are they more likely to be capable of serving as renewable energy hubs if they have breaker and a half configurations? Are they more likely to be able to function as hubs?
And yes, and will be actually provide reliability, greater reliability.
Is there a way I could get you to describe what a breaker and a half configuration is without taking up 5 minutes of hearing time?
Yes, I can.
Please.
A breaker and a half means you have a position of 3 breakers. There are 2 lines in between them. There is a line that is. I'm going to try to picture it for you. You have 3 breakers in a row, physically connected on a bus. You have a line here and a line here, meaning that this particular piece belongs to this line and half of this breaker belongs to that. I'm oversimplifying it, but that's what it means. But it does provide a greater access point and allows us to split flow. And when you build this facility, it's definitely providing the highest reliability. Most of this configuration is the highest reliability modeling on the grid.
Another example of something that would help a hub serve as a renewable energy hub would be expanding bus sections.
Yes.
And what about increasing transformer capacity? Would that also be a feature that would allow a hub to function as a renewable energy hub?
Yes.
And the same for reactive power capability?
Yes.
Adding those elements later would be more expensive than including them in the initial reconstruction, do you think?
Objection calls for speculation outside the scope of his testimony.
All right, well, we've been over this before. First of all, the strategic decisions of the company to decide what to include or exclude in testimony doesn't define the scope of this proceeding. What defines the scope of this proceeding is the statutory just and reasonable standard. Secondly, I don't want the witness to speculate. I want him strictly to use his knowledge and expertise. Go ahead, sir.
So I'm going to repeat the question back to you.
Yes, sir.
Right? You're talking about expansion later, so I would like to use an example because it's easier so I don't get tangled up. You have one transformer and you have 4 renewable projects coming into that hub. Definitely being able to size that transformer into the system to provide access to those 4 projects is possible that will cost less than actually adding 3 transformers, right? To have, or 4 transformers, 1 for each one of the projects. That is what you are trying to get an idea and understanding, but you have to exercise caution when you do that because you have to enter the system, right? You have to be able to get access to the system. It's like a highway, right? To be able to have that application work for you. Oversimplifying it, but I'm just giving you an idea. It could, in most cases, that will be the case.
So I want to make sure you answered my question. I'm not implying that you intended not to. When we were talking about these features that would make a hub useful as a renewable energy hub, and we talked about the breaker and a half, et cetera, my question was, is there any way that you can, without speculating, comment on whether adding those features later would be more expensive than installing them at the outset? Any way to answer that question?
I struggling with a little more expensive.
Please, okay, well, add more dollars. If you
Understood,
compare the
because
two.
at the end of the day, you're looking for optimizing the dollars in a longer term.
I know that.
And
Yeah.
it could, you could have situations, and I experienced it myself, that what you're stating is not true. You can have a least cost option, then when the expansion actually as a later date provides better value than trying to do it at the front end. It is not a one size fits all. I respectfully say that.
Thank you.
Because I lived through what you're referring to in regards to revenue requirements and how you ensure recovers that cost. And it has a lot to do with my answer. I'm going a little bit outside my arena, but I just want to be honest with you. Let's not depart from that premise. And at the same, be careful also to trying to say everything should be funneled into one transformer, because what it means is all the renewables behind it on the loss of the transformer, or when you're going to do operation and maintenance. If I do that, Kevin will be, I don't know, he has punched me yet, but he would not appreciate it, because when you take out of service the transformer to do maintenance, you will not have the entire hub available to you. So I exercise caution in my response. So I believe, yes, there are opportunities that need to be studied, but in all cases, because you still have to operate and maintain the grid.
So nothing implicit, there was nothing implied in the question to suggest one answer was the answer we were looking for. The point is, you're looking at this particular set of factors along with all the others.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
In the expert report of Ms. Bailey and Mr. Judd, there's a discussion of something called a regional integrated transmission plan. Do you recall that?
Yes.
I know you've had a lot of reading to do, and my understanding is that with that plan, they're talking about how we get from here to 2050 with a transmission system on a reasonable cost basis that accommodates the statutory standard for 2050. Do you agree that that's basically what they're trying to get across?
I worked on doing exactly what was mentioned for most of my career, yes.
Okay, well, thank you for doing that, and Mr. Kinnan for doing it here. Would you say that you have such a plan right now?
No. Do we have that plan? We don't. That's what you're asking.
So let's talk about that for a moment. Is there a reason why there is not such a plan right now?
There are more than one.
Okay, well, let's get a sense of what that is as efficiently as we can, and let's talk. Let me tell you where we're headed on this line of questions so we can speed it up, not that you're slowing it down. First, I'd like to understand whether it's a good idea to put such a plan in place. And secondly, I'd like to have an understanding of what it would cost so that if the commissioners decide it's a good idea, they make sure there's a place in the revenue requirement for it. So that's the purpose of this next few minutes. Do you follow?
Yes, I follow.
Okay.
I was waiting.
Well,
I was waiting for. I was actually waiting for an objection, but go ahead.
Okay.
Mr. Hampling.
1 second, please. Sir.
Yeah, this
Sure.
Commissioner Ramos, I think it would be helpful if the witness would define what their regional transmission plan is and what how that helped his utility in Michigan.
Yeah.
That's
One second, please. I just want to make sure procedure is followed, sir. We take, hold 1 second. Let's take a break till 10:10. All right.
TOs in the mainland, right? In which there is a annual or a cadence in which a plan like this is actually developed, and there is the regulatory framework is also supported of it that allows that path to create the plan. Now, I'm going to go to the specific of your question. What would it take? It would take what we're doing, which essentially expand on the studies, expands on the modeling, and continue having a target on how these long-term plans are established for the island and some of the key decisions, and I'll use the word assumptions, right? That's the part that we're struggling the most, I'll say, because this gentleman asked me a question of anything beyond what it's already approved. He didn't use those words, but that's what he asked. That is not an assumption. That is a fact of the matter, what's going to happen. But when we start to predict a future, there are some underlying assumptions that need to be made to be able to determine how to best achieve the ultimate goal that has been established. The challenge we have today here in Puerto Rico, that there are too many unsolicited, there's not a structured way. We're looking to see the PREP to provide direction on it and having that structure. So I say LUMA, can create what is called an integrated system plan.
May I interrupt you for 1 second? I think what I took from what you just said is that you would find it beneficial to get guidance from the Energy Bureau as to what the elements of such a plan ought to contain. Is that correct?
And that is exactly what, in the second part, would it be, then I'll use the word sanction it, right? That is actually something that is going to be approved, so something that we need to work on, something we need to invest our time, which is what you just asked. Provide those base assumptions, make sure that there's some technical basis so the actual commission is able to make informed directional decisions in regards to the underlying assumptions, instead of giving the answers ahead of time, that you have to look like this or you have to look like that. This is our end goals, and then draw a plan, what is it going to take to get to those goals, and also the alternatives for those goals that has been set, have that collaborative discussion. Then the planner of the system, I'll use that word, will be able to create an integrated system plan and answer all those questions to make informed decisions about the three elements that I talked about: sustainability, reliability, and affordability. It has to be an integrated system planning process. That is part of when gentleman asked the question what the RTO meant when I use the word, is a regional transmission organization. Actually, is a conglomerate where received all this information, these discussions are happening, but there is a designated planner and has a responsibility that is supported, that needs the underlying assumptions for that potential future, and then make decisions along the way.
So that's a pretty general explanation of what planners do. I appreciate that. Let me share with you a reaction that I'm having to two parts of our conversation and see what you can do with it. I don't mean this at all to be a criticism, but I'm wondering if there is not today a renewable integrated transmission plan, then what is the analytical framework by which you are carrying out all of the weighing that we talked about before our break? Because it sounded to me like your explanations were that you are taking into account, for example, comparing incurring certain costs now versus incurring them later. And I'm thinking, well, that sounds pretty good. It sounds like they have a plan by which that is the framework for those comparisons. And maybe I was overly optimistic about the situation because now you're saying there was not an actual plan. Help me, please.
I did not say that. I want to start there for the record. We're going to go back to what I was saying earlier, which we need those assumptions. The law in regards to the portfolio of renewable resources today is different than what it was a year ago. That changed the entire integrated resource planning that is being made reference to in regards to renewable integration into the system, because changes the entire makeup, the potential milestones associated with it, and then decisions and assumptions, and that changed the overall planning. So I want to restate it again for the record. There is a plan. There is a plan that was established long-term investment plan that includes all the upgrades from the information and assumptions we knew, while changing the regulatory framework directionally that has been established by law. We have to adapt to it. We should not be moving in a direction of something that is actually not approved to be done. So the planning has been altered as a result of that. So when you ask before, do we have a specific plan? I want to rephrase it that a plan is to be established based on a specific timeline. We are submitting, or I call it supplemental information or additional information about the direction of the integrated resource plan based on what was directed by REP for an integrated resource plan. That informs what else LUMA needs to do. That filing or plan associated with that impact is going to be turned in next week. Did I get it right? It's next week. The IRP.
It'll get turned in when it gets turned in. Go ahead.
That's fine. It's going to be next week. So that's what I want to answer the question. It's not there isn't one. It's that as you change regulations, we have to adjust. The plan has been altered. We're replanning again.
Right. I hear you. I heard you the first time. So the point, I need a little more specificity, if you can provide it today, about what you would like the Energy Bureau to specify to give you more guidance as to what should be included in a forthcoming renewable integrated energy plan, and what you would want to see in the rate case decision to pay for it. Can you give it some thought before we break for the end of the day?
Yes, I could give you some.
All right. Let me change subjects then. Thank you. Are you familiar with I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, the Jobos substation?
Hobos.
Hobos, thank you. Well, here I am in Puerto Rico. All right,
Okay.
Thank you. My apologies, the Hobos substation. And is LUMA currently reconstructing it or relocating it outside of a flood zone?
We're in the engineering and planning analysis of doing so, as you're saying. So it is.
Okay.
It is in the scope. That's what you're asking. If it is in the scope, the answer is yes.
What is the nature of the work that you would be doing on it? Do you know?
Wow.
Short, briefly.
It's hard to answer briefly, but essentially we're assessing what are the mitigating factors to be able to get out of the flood zone based on the criteria.
Right.
It could be built somewhere else.
Is that work that you're conducting now part of the FEMA-funded substation rebuild program?
It's a hazard mitigation. Yes.
Sir?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the concept of a renewable generation zone?
The answer is yes. It has a
Okay.
concept. Yes.
All right. And is the Hobos area a potential renewable generation zone based on what you know about recent responses to solicitations?
Yeah. The answer is yes.
Just trying to get the motor going here, okay?
Yeah. The answer is yes.
And has LUMA included in the Hobos design additional capacity or bus configuration or space to facilitate future renewable interconnection?
Yes.
And by the way, back to breaker and a half, is the substation being constructed with breaker and a half bus configuration?
I don't have that knowledge at hand.
Okay.
But just to answer your question, I don't have that knowledge at hand, so I can't attest to it.
All right. Would it be possible at some point to find that out?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. I don't want to answer your question with assumptions.
You're doing great and appreciate it very much. And once the work on the Hobos substation is complete, what additional work would be required for two independent power producers each to interconnect a 100 megawatt solar facility, if you know? Don't speculate.
Can I answer that when I do the little homework that you just asked me?
That would be,
I don't.
that gets us a better answer. That would be
It
great.
is because I don't know right now.
All right.
You're asking very specific question. I cannot not answer.
All right. Well, thank you. So whatever that you can tell us about,
Can I get a second? Sorry.
of course.
I want to write what you just asked.
Yes, sir.
So.
You just tell me when you're ready to move forward.
Sir, can I repeat back one part of the question?
Perfect.
You say 2 100 megawatt solar sites?
Yes.
I saw 3 pieces of your question. I want to repeat it back to you
Please
so
do.
I could answer it correctly, which is, we discussed about renewable zone. You're asking what work happened in Hubbles in regards to the floating zone design in the scope of FEMA, when that is included on it, is breaking on half is the configuration, can 100 megawatt sites be incorporated as additional? What is the impact associated with it?
Perfect. And without making you use more space on that page, if you could specify the elements to the extent you know of that work. For example, would it involve expanding the bus? Would it involve adding breaker and a half bays? And would it involve adding transformer and protection capacity? You got the drift.
It is implied in your request,
Right.
so I understand what the scope of what you're asking.
Thank you very much. And you can discuss with your counsel when is a comfortable time to come back with that, and we'll deal with it when it does. Thank you. I'm going to change subjects now, and then I'll be almost finished. No, we'll change subjects now, and then I will be finished.
Mr. Hempling,
Sir.
Commissioner Ramos, before we resumed, I had asked a question. I think the gentleman referred to my question as defining RTO, and that's not what I meant. I believe you were asking him about regional transmission planning. Is that correct? Was that a question you were asking him?
I was asking about that, but I was referring to the concept of the regional integrated transmission plan that is discussed in the report of Ms. Bailey and Mr. Judd.
Okay. Did he discuss the definition of what that would entail? The
Yes,
planning, not the. I know what an RTO is.
Yep.
Okay.
I could answer the question if I.
well, just to answer your question, sir, while the commissioners were in the back room, he did have that dialogue with me. Yes, sir.
Okay. Perfect. I don't need it then. I think Kate.
Ms. Bailey.
Thank you. Just to make sure we're talking about the same thing, Commissioner Ramos. Our report refers to a renewable integration plan, transmission plan, and you're saying a regional transmission plan.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that in your mind, you're thinking about what we're talking about, which is a renewable transmission plan, not a regional transmission plan.
Okay. I would. Yeah. So I guess
Right.
Puerto Rico would be one region, so it wouldn't
Right.
apply.
But what we're recommending in our report is a renewable transmission plan that shows how they would plan, if they had to get 100% renewables in place by 2050.
Okay. Thank you.
Back to you and me, Mr. Melendez. Thank you. I'm not sure these are questions best for you, so you just let me know. I want to talk to you about the recovery of costs associated with the renewable transition, and specifically what I want to talk to you about is the difference between 2 ways in which these costs could get recovered. One way is developer pays for the upgrades, and then of course is going to reflect that cost in its sales price under the purchase power agreement. And the other is the customers pay initially through base rates, recognizing that either way, the costs end up with the customers because they'll be paying for the costs one way or the other, either through base rates or through the PPA clause. You familiar with that distinction that I want to talk to you about? You familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay. And are you the person to answer some questions
No.
about? Sir?
No.
Who would be the person? Would it be Mr. Figueroa, somebody in regulatory, do you know, or does Ms. Mercado know?
I It depends on the question, right?
All right.
And if it's a commercial question, it's a regulatory question, then I believe what I'm hearing from you, sir, is a commercial question.
Let's see. If it's not you, then we'll find another way to get these questions across. So don't answer anything that you don't find within your expertise and familiarity, as always. The prices charged by developers reflect their business risks, yes?
And I'll answer this on the basis of my engineering capacity. The answer will be yes.
Among the types of business risks they face, one is the possibility of non-payment.
Could be. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Possible. Or early termination,
Yeah. Those are clauses that yes.
curtailment.
That's their operational. That's an operational element, and that will be studied. Yes.
It's a risk, business risk.
Yes.
Just doing throat clearing here to get us started.
Yeah.
And if the funding for these upgrades is performed by ratepayers through base rates, that reduces the risk that the
Objection.
developer faces. Yes, ma'am?
Objection, the witness has established that he has not, the foundation has not been laid to ask the question to that witness and it calls for speculation.
Are you capable of answering the question as to whether upfront payments by the customers reduces the business risk that the IPP has?
I'm going to answer the question fully. Is definitely a speculation to say it reduces. It's
Okay.
absolutely. Can I expand on it, or that's enough for you?
It's enough for the moment because I think I know where this set of questions is going to go. Let me see if there's anything, and again, I'm not taking anything away from what you've been doing with us today. Let me just see which of these questions will get us value in a conversation between us as opposed to some other means. Give me a second, please. Why don't you tell me generally, what's your experience, if any, with looking at PPA prices?
Extensive, I'll say. I mean, dealing with that for a very long
Sorry,
time.
yes, an objection as to relevance, but just stating that for the record.
Well, the relevance is that customers pay for it, and this is a rate case, and what we're trying to figure out here is what's the best way for cost of the upgrading of the system for renewable energy to be recovered, whether it's through the PPA process or through its base rate, so the commissioners can make a decision in this rate case as to how to minimize total costs.
If I may, the question is about his personal experience, and that's my relevance objection.
Well, the reason I'm trying to ask him his personal experience is to save time and figure out whether this line of questions is making any sense to ask of this witness. So let me just try another way, and then we'll see if I can do it without any more objections. But I appreciate the ones because they give us all the care that we need to do the right work here. So thank you for that, Ms. Mercado, as always.
Can you re-ask the question, sir?
I'm going to find a question that I think is
Oh,
best for
I'm
you to
sorry.
answer.
Okay.
Give me a second, please. The about the interconnection planning process. Do you go project by project right now, or do you create a cluster of projects and try to analyze them together? Could you tell us about that?
So the gentleman to your right, I'm sorry.
Mr. Schiffman.
Mr.
There's a
Schiffman.
lot of people here.
Thank you, Mr. Shipman. Appreciate that. Had a question earlier about how we enter this into the modeling tool. So when the project is modeled and determine what is the best alternative, I'll call it the least cost option that the systems get to determine. So the reliability criteria are met and the capacity requirements are met as decided, then you determine the cost of that project. From a transmission perspective, the cost where you're heading probably in the other side of the interconnection, the cost to actual customers and how that gets commercially recovered is not part of the analysis that I'm making reference to. I think that's where you're getting, and I want to make it clear. But we do determine what is the least cost alternative that actually addresses the reliability, loadability, the overloading, the voltage violations for my project. Then you get into a project definition. And then the project definition has an estimate and an accuracy depending on the level of what you're trying to do. As you may recall, you went through a list of things that you need to consider for new projects and expansion that you went through it. That is not done on the planning level because it's just a conceptual design. So the overall total cost gets into future phases when a project is assessed. So I want to at least get an idea on where we at in the process. All these projects are evaluated as a group. They are evaluated when they're potentially going to come into service because it will define the topology of the system that is being studied to understand what I just described earlier and the impact of what solutions need to be in place when these projects are added.
Assessing the necessity for upgrades in a particular area, it's more efficient to assess multiple projects at once than individuals separately if they're in the same area.
That is correct.
Question calls for speculation.
Ms. Mercado, this witness is not going to speculate. He's going to tell me whether he's capable or incapable of answering a question. Some of these questions, you could answer it with speculation or you could answer it with knowledge. You just be very careful and do all you can to give us value. You with me?
I am with you, sir.
Okay. I'm just a little lay person asking you. So, for example, if you're planning for multiple projects at once, for example, if you're going to install interconnections for multiple projects at the same place around the same time, you bring out the crews once rather than multiple times, if you can. Is that correct?
That's a little bit of the question now. You're talking about executability and synergies in projects and all that. In some cases, if you're looking for that, is valuable to be able to do, definitely. But sometimes that becomes an impediment depending on the size. So I'm answering your question, but it has to be evaluated. That's what we do. That's what I've done. But, there is a point minimum return.
Let's put it this way. Among the things that you have to evaluate are, for example, the mobilization of crews.
And also the impact to the operations team has to be considered. You can't just simply take all the entire system out of service or entire substations to make 3 interconnections. That is not viable. The fragility of the system plays into it. So it's a very complex, highly skilled planning that has to take place because you're working on energized system. So that also needs to be into what is called a constructability of the actual project, how viable that is.
Exactly what we're doing is making a list of the elements of constructabilities that you have to analyze to decide whether it makes more sense to plan one at a time and implement one at a time or implement them together. These are the factors. That's all I'm doing.
I'm answering that, right?
And a permitting process is another one where maybe there's a benefit to doing multiple at once, maybe not.
That is very correct.
Okay, and you're not speculating now.
I have not.
Just checking.
No, I have not. I have not in any moment.
Excellent, excellent. Another example would be if the substation has to be modified, maybe it would be best to do that modification, taking into account multiple projects, maybe not.
You got it.
Okay. And all the engineering, procurement, and commissioning work, again, it's a factor that you consider in deciding whether to address simultaneously multiple projects or a single project.
Yes.
That's all I have for you on this subject today. By the way, are you the person who will be happy to answer the questions on the veg management contracts, or is that somebody else?
It's a combination of the gentleman to my right, which I'm gonna be happy to have him take the lead because he's ready for it.
That will be later. I don't know how you find this, but I'll be the person asking the questions, and I'll try to do it most efficiently. Mr. Schiffman has a few final questions on the subjects he discussed, and I want to thank you again, Mr. Melendez, for your attention and your work. Thank you.
Mr. Hempling, this is Commissioner Ramos. I have a couple questions regarding the breaker and a half configuration. I believe you stated that the breaker and a half improves reliability. Is that what you said?
It provides higher reliability.
It provides
flexibility.
higher reliability. How would you describe, or what do you mean by reliability in that sense? We're talking about a substation that essentially, or a switch yard that essentially feeds in power from different power sources. So what does it actually providing? How is it providing reliability?
So I'm gonna physically describe it to you. I think that's gonna help you. When you have an element that failed, right? Yeah, the break it on a half configuration. I'm using my hand so you can see it, right? You have a break it on the right and break it on the left. That's what the line comes in. And you have a fault on the other line, right? In a breaker and a half configuration, you have the opportunity to isolate that fault using both breakers, right? And not impacting the rest of the substations. If you use a different configuration, it's called a linear assessment. You have a fault on the bus, you lose all your lines. That's what we're talking about, the configuration, the flexibility the breaker and a half can provide to you.
So it's providing different paths for the energy to either come in or go out of the substation.
That is correct. And also reduces the impact when it comes to, going to be a little technical, but just to, when you have a fault, it actually also dissipates and they split the fault current between the two buses, which implies you need less capacity when you're designing the substation. You're able to do more with less in the context of the area that you're utilizing and the asset you're using. So it also allows to provide a longer term operational flexibility that we just talked yesterday. So there are other values, but I'm just mentioning two for you.
So I understand if you're feeding loads, I understand how it would increase reliability or be more reliable to be able to route the power to the one or the other load if you have a failure inside the substation. But if we're talking about feeding in power, a 20 megawatt solar array, 50 megawatt solar array, that without that capacity, the entire system would still have enough capacity to feed the load. How is having that increased reliability to that one 50 megawatt source, how does that increase the reliability to the entire system?
So when we're talking about the configuration that we just talked about, I think that's the source of your question, the breaker and a half configuration.
Mm-hmm.
It's a networked system. So it provides you more path for that energy to go through. When we're talking about generation could be hypothetical in Maya West, but it's needed in San Juan. So you need a network and multiple paths to get there. So when you interrupt one or the other, you still have that redundancy that is needed so you don't interrupt power. And our customers don't feel that. That's what you're trying to accomplish when you use a switching station or a hub, I'll say, to interconnect various elements on it to provide more access and reliability and redundancy, what's called availability of the resource, generation resource. So in the case of the load that you mentioned, it's different applications on how you're serving load. When in the case of generation, you want it to be available because when you lose generation, you may have to do what we're doing today. We don't have enough reserves, and we have to remove customers from service. So it's the reliability needed to interconnect a generation resource is extremely important, right? You have to make sure those investments are made so you ensure that those resources are available because everybody's depending on them.
What is the difference? What would an alternative to a breaker and a half configuration be, and what would the different ballpark difference in cost would,
Wow.
what would it be?
That's a very, I will be speculating in regards to ballpark cost from a feasibility, but I'm going to give you another example of a configuration. I call it a ring bus, which is less breakers than a breaker and a half to provide you the next level of reliability. Just imagine a square,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just to give you an idea, that's what I'm referring to. Then the next one is a linear bus arrangement, which is just basically one point interconnection, that when you lose that, you lose all the elements for it. So those are kind of the three most common that I could just mention to you. And the breaker and a half is the most commonly used when we're trying to ensure reliability and access for transmission. You will see that across You can see it on the island. A lot of breaking on a half is where our main generation is because of the level of availability of the facility to provide access to those resources. The next, like I said, is a ring boss arrangement, which is less components. The cost differential, it all depends, right? This is not the only cost that you account for a project, so I can't tell you whether one or the other it is right now. It all depends, project by project.
Okay. Yeah. Well, actually, no, I'm sorry. We haven't talked about minimum technical requirements of the renewable energy
Integrate.
projects, specifically talking about the battery resources that usually are required to control the ramps and the sudden fluctuations. Is having extra capacity or capacity interconnected of standalone energy storage, would that be a substitute for these projects, and would that eliminating those requirements from those projects, would it make them cheaper?
And you started with the premises of minimal technical requirements. Are you still, your question still based on the minimal technical requirements, or or is the second part what you're asking?
Well, let me see if I can rephrase the question. Would having enough or sufficient utility scale standalone storage, would that be a substitute for the minimum technical requirements for any project on the grid?
No, I think, and I want to have you to understand, every project is going to have a minimal technical requirements.
Well, I'm talking about the minimal technical requirements specifically regarding the ramp controls and the to deal with the fluctuations of the renewable energy.
So so is it two? It's a two-part questions. I think I'm trying to help you understand in regards to battery storage and how they work. Right? You have to design. We have to define how you're going to use it to actually build it. Right, and that has to be defined commercially. That has to be defined operationally on how you're going to operate it. It's not as simple as it is stated. Also, they have a life, so they will have minimal technical requirements based on its application that you're utilizing it for. So it's very difficult to answer your question. It's a very technical, very in-depth technical, but at the end of the day, it doesn't negate having to have minimal technical requirements to be interconnected in the system, regardless of what you use it for. They are technical requirements for any and all applications to be able to integrate it into the electric.
Yeah, I understand that there has to be minimum technical requirements to build anything. My point is that in the continental United States, there's projects that get built, renewable energy projects that don't require any storage whatsoever. And they may, I believe that's part of the reason why the projects here in Puerto Rico are more expensive. That's one of the reasons. I see you nodding and saying no. Are you saying that those requirements are imposed by PREPA and now LUMA on these projects, they don't make them more expensive?
No, I don't. I think that and then you mentioned two entities that are utilities, which is PREPA and LUMA, and we're applying utility requirements that allows us to put it through. I think when we're talking about technical requirements versus project requirements, right, which are different things, the technical requirements should exist to ensure stability to the system. And that's what I'm trying to say.
I'm talking specifically about energy storage.
Yeah. But I'm struggling with if I may, I struggling to be able to give you an answer because I don't know exactly where you're coming from in regards to, you use the word making it more expensive. And that is a broad statement. So I cannot answer your question because that, in my experience, and I'll lean on this for a second. In my experience, there are different ways to value a project and how to bring it into a system. Integrate it into a system, and you model that to make a decision on what that value is to determine the appropriate cost associated with it and how you recover it. From an operational perspective, day-to-day technical, there are technical requirements that need to be met. LUMA is not imposing technical requirements that are beyond what is necessary to be able to operate and reliably the electrical system, which are in support of and in coordination with some of the things that PREPA had in the past and continue having as specific requirements themselves. So I want to make sure that it's a distinction. You say it costs more, and I struggle with that. Hopefully that we can just leave it there.
Well, batteries are one of the most costly components of renewable energy systems. And if you require a project that does not have storage to have batteries to control the ramp or deal with the fluctuations when you have batteries elsewhere in the system, that would increase the price of the project,
And
wouldn't it?
I want to help you, and I want to make a technical correction, if you don't mind. A battery does not produce energy. Battery needs to be charged, right? It is coupled in many occasions with a solar projects to be able to be charged. It doesn't. No, I don't want to. It might. Yes, it doesn't.
Did I say the batteries produce energy?
No, you said it's a renewable resource.
Well,
It's not a renewable resource. It doesn't produce energy, and it's not. You call it a resource. In order to call it a resource, you have to be able to do both things.
the resource in this case would be the component, the system of the renewable energy generation and the batteries. But maybe, do you want to contribute something, Ms. Baker?
I just want to clarify what I think you're trying to get at. He's talking about the minimum technical requirements, I think, of a solar project that require battery storage. And so if you had utility scale battery storage that replaced the battery storage that's required in a solar project, would the solar price be lower?
Like I said, commercial. I could answer the question, but I should not because that's not my area of expertise.
Mr.
Commercially,
Hernandez, this is Commissioner Madera. I think it's a very simple question. We have heard, and probably many of us that are here today, historically, that Puerto Rico has very stringent minimum technical requirements for solar projects. Some people say it's because of the dire situation of the fleet and that it's not capable of handling ramps and the intermittence of the projects. So if that's true, then projects in Puerto Rico, because of that reason, are more expensive than in the US, because if you have a utility that has a fleet that can counter the intermittence in a timely manner and capacity, then you don't have to invest in so many batteries for that purpose in the solar project footprint. Is that true?
so Lillian, can I call you Lillian? Ma'am, let me just one piece you said about minimal technical requirements, which are specific to a project. I want to move it out a little bit and use the word requirements. Just
Okay, I'm fine with that because I
because
understand that you have minimum technical requirements.
that is
But let's say that we are talking about
operational
that
requirements.
part of those requirements that is to deal with ramp up. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I just want to, because you're asking from an
Mhm.
engineering
No, I know.
Thank you. What you stated operational requirements based on the needs of the system. Yeah, in order to address it, to integrate a resource is that what you both are referring to, that's what you're referring to. Yeah, they are going to be cost. And pricing differences. Well, that's you are correct in what you're saying, right? We're trying to meet the needs of the system,
Mhm.
with the specific requirements.
Okay, so if we have a better fleet, maybe the projects would not require such stringent storage components to deal with the intermittence. And if we have, like Commissioner Ramos mentioned, standalone batteries that are being charged, because I know, I'm not an engineer, but I know they don't produce energy. I think that everybody knows that here. But if we have them throughout the system, then maybe we can use it for the intermittence of the projects and reduce the cost that the customer is going to pay at the end of the day, because we have to be, and the customers have to be aware that everything we put in a project or the developer puts in a project is embedded in the price of the energy at the end of the day. It's a business, and it's done like that everywhere. So if they don't have to provide those requirements as stringent as they are in Puerto Rico, is it fair to say that the prices we may get in procurement processes may be lower without looking at any other variables or components of the equation, which we know affect the price as well? Just looking at this.
Just respectfully, I would state my objections as to assumes facts, not any evidence in this case, and argumentative.
I think it's fair to ask this question because we're talking about costs of renewal projects, and that is something in the core of this discussion. And let's use it as a hypothetical.
Answer the question to the best of your ability. State the underlying facts that will be the basis of your answer, and don't go beyond your personal knowledge and professional knowledge.
I was going to start there, if I may. This response is specifically on a technical evaluation based on my professional expertise, not necessarily implying anything, so I'll start there. So your conclusion is accurate in the context is, yes, if you actually were able to utilize a different modeling or application, which is what I said to this gentleman, what you are referring to is the exact same I was trying to answer. You're utilizing the resource differently. Yes, because and that is very, very, very important. And I want to emphasize that is key, essential to making decisions utilizing storage. So you are actually focusing on the right thing. So I commend you for that. And I answer again, yes, it actually, the more requirements and expectations on that technology, the more likely it's going to be that the cost and the commercial requirements will increase. There are other items that were mentioned by the examiner when he was asking me questions that are going to bring back to you of the different risk that interplay with it, having negotiated some of these contracts in the past, making those decisions require the entire information. Hopefully that, from my professional view, my experience, having done what you both are asking in previous, your assessment and the importance of it, you are focusing on the right things. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. I have a follow-up. If I would like you to answer if you know that whether LUMA MTRs are dynamic, because it's case by case or project by project, and depending on the conditions of the systems in the area, etc. Is LUMA envisioning that if the fleet changes and improves, minimal technical requirements overall may be less stringent if the system is capable of handling that intermittence, at least partly? Because now we know that it's impossible, and everybody knows that the people dispatching are struggling at some portions of the day. But if that improves, is LUMA thinking that with time, the MTRs would be less stringent?
So I was waiting for I want to paraphrase your question that I'm about to answer, because I think your question is important. When you say, in regards to changing the requirements, I want to put the NTRs aside and talk about the operational requirements again. There is going to be flexibility over time to what resources are going to be. In the context of what LUMA is doing, LUMA will adapt to the needs of the system, which is what you're referring to. And we will adapt accordingly to the direction provided by the commission and what is required along the way. So I want to reemphasize from a planning perspective, and now I'm going to play the role of a planning perspective. The answer is yes. We are committed, and we remain committed to be able to adapt operational requirements as the evolution of the systems evolve. But we also need to be mindful that we don't want to add a resource that makes things more difficult.
No, I am.
That's all.
I'm well aware of that, and that's why I use the word envisioned.
Yeah. So
because
from
this point to several years, conditions may change, and I just wanted to know if Luma was open to that potential scenario,
So
not now, but in the future.
as the responsible party in Luma to be able to envision that, the answer is that's what it should be doing, and that's what we're going to do.
In that potential vision, would you consider that batteries right now can be used for those storage minimal technical requirements and also as a storage resource? Or at least manufacturers say that they are capable of doing that now. So it would be like having more potential generation from that or power from that same project rather than having batteries sitting there just waiting if there is intermittence.
So
And if you need to correct me,
no, I'm not.
feel free to do that. I'm the only one here that is not an engineer, but I navigate
you've done
through engineers.
No, you're done very well. And I think your question is, are we adapting to it, right? We would, but there's a commercial component associated with it. It's not my responsibility. So I'm answering from a technical perspective. Absolutely. If your question is, do we want to maximize all the resources that have been added? Absolutely. Yes, we are on the same page on that. And that's what we envision in my organization. But that comes with a commercial component associated with it and all the other elements. But what you're asking from what Luma is doing, that's what we do every single day throughout the process. So that hopefully that answers your question. And yes, and I will use an example to illustrate this for you on a governmental utility that I worked prior to coming here, in which I had to evaluate owning a project versus doing a power purchase agreement and demonstrating to customers the value of it. Having a solar project and co-locating energy storage to what size we needed to do it and demonstrate the ultimate value to it. And we were able to demonstrate it was saving over $400 million on a cost of energy to the customer. So that what you're referring to is I have personal experience of leading those efforts. So I'm just reaffirming that what you are asking is not something new from the context of the people at Luma to be able to do it. But there's a lot of other elements, as you know, that need to be able to be at play. So hopefully that gives you.
Thank you.
I'm not satisfied. I'm sorry, because my question was specifically, will energy utility scale or energy storage connected elsewhere on the grid, would that substitute, and I'm not going to call them minimum technical requirements, storage requirements that are required for a PV project or a solar project? Let me give you an example specific. There's 3 projects being built on the southeast coast of Puerto Rico. 2 of them are co-located with battery. Even aside from the fact that they're co-located with batteries, they have a huge array of batteries for storage as a storage requirement for interconnection to the grid. My question is, does utility scale storage, standalone or co-located with a PV project, is that a substitute for the storage requirements that are now imposed on any project, renewable project that's interconnecting to the grid?
I'm struggling to answer your question. I don't want to be disrespectful, but this is can it substitute some components of it? The answer is yes. But use the word full substitution is a little too broad. But it could be discussed for a longer term, right? Knowing the facts associated with it, could it? Yes. That answer your question, could have, yes. I have Apple applications, and with that is the case, yes, I have seen applications, that's the case, but they have to be discussed further. And apologize if I'm not right. I try to be as helpful as I can, but it's hard to do without understanding the facts and all the details. You're talking about a specific project, but it could. The answer is yes, it could.
Okay.
But you said will, and that's very much different.
You answered the question, right?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
I have a question, but and bear with me. I went home yesterday with something lingering in my mind. Yesterday we talked about the costs related to improvements in the system or maintenance in the system related to DERs. And you talked about how much money you would need for that. And you mentioned the public policy and who would pay for it in terms of that Luma would go after the person responsible under the law for paying for that improvement. And that I wanted to confirm whether your budget or what your budget for that item in our petition has suffered any revisions, internal or otherwise, because there is a potential change in public policy that would significantly change who is responsible or to what extent for the payment of those improvements to the grid. And we're not talking about, before anybody jumps, about the value of solar. I know the boundaries, but the money is the money, and you would need money for doing the improvements, or otherwise you can't connect people. So the line item that you included in the petition, would it need to be revised based on the joint resolution that the House of Representatives has approved regarding that subject? Are you aware of that piece of legislation?
I'm aware of the piece of legislation. The answer is yes. And your other question was, wouldn't be revised in a forward-looking way, depending on what the legislation lands,
Mm-hmm.
then we will revise accordingly.
But your assumption was that the person responsible for it is the one under the current law. If that changes, and is that responsibility comes from a smaller group than the other customers, you have to spread the cost amongst the other customers. Am I right?
You are correct, ma'am.
Do you have any estimates of what that impact would be? How much?
What I would like to answer your questions, I think there is a list of already identified impact and the cost associated with it. I'm going to depart from the premises and the assumption that the law is a forward-looking law and not a backward-looking law. So the cost would be of the things that we have already identified, and anything that is forward will be removed. So the timing of the implementation of the law will dictate what will change on a forward-looking basis. So we have a budget in 28 and 27 associated with this. And let's say, and I'm using an assumption, the law comes in effect in January and there is a redistribution, then the redistribution will be applied to those numbers.
Could you tell me what the exhibit is for those costs? I think it's 11 million. 11.5 million.
But it will be easier if we do the ROI. The ROI.
If the exhibit could be identified for the witness, yes.
I don't know the number. Is your exhibit?
I think it's 205. 205.
2.05.
There's also a cost in his testimony and in other testimonies. So that's why I asked. There's different documents that outline the budget.
Mr. Mercado, yesterday Yeah,
know what the document is.
yeah. Yesterday when we were talking about that number, you mentioned that there's an ROI that specifically says the breakdown of that $11.5 million. That's what we're looking for.
There's
Which exhibit is that? Do you know?
We could look for it. Right now, I don't have them open yet. There's
Okay.
several otherwise on. Yeah. And I don't know if it's marked as our exhibit, but yeah, we would need a few minutes if you want to take your break.
Time for that.
Yes.
No, let's stop for this. Let's give them time.
what, if I may, just for my interest of time,
Uh-huh.
we can look at what is on the screen right now and we can answer that part while we get the other exhibit. Is that okay?
Okay.
So this line items that is shown on the screen on say numbers specifically. So there is an FY26 in the first row that is outlined in PVU T6, which is road 155 is $11.5 million for
Okay.
2025. So what I make reference to is that's already incurred impact as a result of the DER, which means they are transformers, switches, and other components that have been identified that need to be replaced. So
Okay.
in-
And that assumes those 11.5 million assumes that is something you can't recover from the applicants or the developers, or is it encompasses that?
that assumes under the current law that ratepayers will have to pay for it because there's no mechanism to say any other recovery doesn't exist. The next year, if the law changes in which there is clarity on it,
Why do you say that there is no process to recover that?
the current law, the current law is written, they interconnect immediately. So system impact.
Yeah, you interconnect automatically, but the law establishes who pays for the improvement that is cost for the system that you are interconnecting. And I know that there are some issues on whether it's the law established a fair system for going after those solar projects, but it says clearly that the improvements have to be paid by the applicant. What I am trying to understand is whether those 11.5 are excluding money that you are pursuing from the applicants, or whether 11.5 is the total amount.
It's a total amount.
And you are going to go after the developers or the applicants, I'm sorry, for their portion of those 11.5.
Yes, the answer would be as directed by law, we will actually have to have the mechanisms to be able to determine. I'm not an expert commercially team, so I'm a little bit.
Do you have any idea of how much of those 11.5
I don't.
you are going to pursue?
I don't.
No, no,
I just-
that's fine, because it's the resolution, joint resolution that you already included.
That's correct.
But what-
That is correct.
okay, perfect.
Yeah. Then she asked for additional split. I cannot tell you this. I don't know. Got it.
Of those 11.5, you have the mandate to pursue reimbursement from the applicants who caused the need for the improvement under the current law.
So
And I can only think that you were going to pursue that money. What would you do when you get the reimbursement with the money that you got from the rest of the customers?
Objection as to argumentative.
There's absolutely, one second, please. There was absolutely no argument in that question. It may be beyond the witness's capability because it's a question of regulatory
that's
procedure.
what I was going to answer.
Well, then that's the answer. You don't have the answer.
I
because
don't have the answer to a
I'm
question.
speaking, sir.
Who can answer that from your the witnesses that Luma has?
Is this something that Mr. Figueroa knows about and can get back to us on? Is that the answer? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, would you kindly consider doing so? And when you're ready to provide that answer, you'll let us know through your counsel and we'll deal with it on the record. Is that okay, Ms. Mercado? Thank you very much. Commissioners,
I-
sir,
Excuse me.
please. Yes, sir.
Can you add the amounts for each years? Can you add that 11.57? Can you add that? So I
I'm
just
sorry?
want to know the whole amount that the ratepayers are paying for that improvement the next 3 years. Like something like 45 million. Just add them. The exact amount, but including for the record.
Are you asking me at this time? Yeah, we can do it. Can I look at the
Yeah,
screen?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So can I ask to please zoom in a little bit? It's a little hard for me even with my glasses to see. So
Can the clerk expand just make it bigger? He wears glasses. He talks very well and he sees very well, but he needs a little help.
thank you. It's row 155. Same thing. I'll tell you numbers. Can the clerk please help me with see the columns on the top to make sure I'm adding the right numbers in the right years? Can I see the top heading of these columns?
Will you be able to specify whether you're talking about constrained or optimal and perhaps provide both, if that makes sense?
Right now, I'm referring to the non-federal capital on the exhibit 2.5, if I'm reading this correctly. And the total of each year for the record is 11.5 for 2026, 17.2 for 2027, 17.2 for 2028, with a total of $45.9 million estimated for of the
45.9.
45.9
For which budget?
for whichever the budget is for the 2.5, which at this time I could say is the optimal budget. But please make sure we reference this file as the reference file that was used. And for it to finalize what I'm referring to, the a specific of the assets already identified that are impacted, it's on a ROI, and there's also a projection, right? Because we have done studies and we have determined the impact, and there are others that we are projecting as we continue seeing 40,000 of these a year. Then we are projecting what the additional cost would be, and that's where you're seeing a delta and a specific number from an estimation.
Okay. 1.4.
Oh, 46. Thank you.
Mr. Hempling, when Mr. Figueroa answers the question from a regulatory standpoint, I would like for him to make the distinction between the current law and what is being proposed and what the impact would be on how much can LUMA recover from the applicants, because that's to the core of this discussion. The change in public policy that is proposed would reduce the chance of recovering large improvements from applicants. It would rather go to the transformer only, which would leave in a feeder probably a lot of other money that would be covered by the rest of the customers. Many of them do not have solar, so I would like for him to take that into consideration when he answers.
Mr. Figueroa, do you have that? And Council, do you have that? And I think when the commissioner refers to what can you recover, perhaps that's in part a legal question as to what the authority is to recover it in terms of your discretion and in terms of your obligation. And then to the extent you can answer, it then would be is in terms of your planning and strategy for how you would go about doing it. Mr. Figueroa, did you have a clarifying question, sir?
Just simply when would we plan to do this? Is this something that we would discuss, or
Let's work that out.
Okay.
Let's have you talk to your counsel, and your counsel can report to me after the next break, so that we have on the record a comfortable point in time when you can provide that. I know that there's a lot going on back at the office, and you're in the middle of a hearing here. Does that work for you, sir?
Yes.
Ma'am, does that work for you?
Yes, I would like to state for the record, exhibits 141 and 142 for Luma discuss this topic of the technical evaluations and the budget projections. They're on the record. If I find additional exhibits that are relevant to this, I will point them out. But yeah, we will consider, we follow your order. And if current exhibits answer the full scope of what you're requesting, we will also state so.
Mr. Hempling?
I would also like to for Mr. Figueroa to consider in his answer the other change that is being proposed about not charging for studies, and how much would that impact in the budget? What's the number for that if they are not going to be able to recover that from the applicants of the DERs? Just to know exactly what numbers we're talking under one legal scenario and then the proposed one. Thank you.
Mr. Hempling?
Oh, 1 second, please. I want to make sure they have a chance to take notes.
So this is Alejandro Figueroa for the record. I just to confirm that I wrote it down and will be providing that information.
All right, thank you.
On this side. Carlos Fernandez for CESA.
Mr. Fernandez for CESA. Yes, sir.
During this whole conversation, I've been thinking about, the proposed joint resolution before the legislature, and the questions are being asked of the members of the panel. If this isn't speculation, I don't know what is. It's not still a law in the books, and we are asking the panelists to come up with questions to answers which may not be applicable in this context. Also, going back on and I heard Commissioner Mateo said that we're not talking here value of solar, but it's eminently unfair to only think about solar in the context of debits here, in terms of cost imposed upon others, without considering the value of all the exported energy that these systems will be producing for the rest of the system. So we're only looking at one part of the equation. We're not looking at the whole thing. So I just wanted to make that point for your consideration, given your prior holdings in this rate case.
Mr. Fernandez, first of all, thank you very much for that reminder of my prior rulings and my obligation to draw a clear line of relevance and scope in this case. What we're doing right now simply is asking for information. Whether it goes into the record will depend on my decision as to its relevance to what is in this case, which is setting rates. Right now, I have 5 commissioners who are deeply interested in knowing something very simple, and it was begun with the OIPC the other day, which is there a request for rate recovery in the revenue requirement of costs that are not going to be, of course, that the statute is saying should not be recovered from customers. And so the need in this case right now, without regard to any conversation about value of solar, is to determine what is a recoverable cost and what's not. So I appreciate your point. I'm personally not worried that we're getting near that boundary, but I always appreciate the reminder that you've given us. And if we get any close to that line, I hope you'll let me know again, sir. Okay? All right, thank you. Is there anything else, commissioners?
No.
All right, then we'll turn to Mr. Schiffman. He has back to, remember his line of questions at 9 o'clock this morning. He has a few left on that, and then we'll talk about where we are in this morning's schedule. Mr. Schiffman.
Thank you. Mr. Melendez, when we were talking earlier about network upgrade costs for the Tranche 1 projects, you talked about, while those that you have made application for federal funding and that there's been A&E funds, I guess, authorized or able for use, but in advance of the actual obligation. What happens if you spend A&E funds, but then a project ultimately isn't obligated?
It's a great question. Procedurally, the funds will have to be evaluated to determine whether our recoverable costs based on the rules of FEMA. Through the FEMA process, right, they are actually considered expenditures that are eligible to remain in the FEMA. If not, those costs is transferred over to customers.
But is there an instance where you would have to do a refund on the federal side, like back to FEMA, or no?
So there's a reconciliation of expenditures, right? And that through that reconciliation is essentially that refund that you're making reference to. But there are some rules that governs that in the FEMA grant process.
And the other question I have is where in the rate filing or all of the supporting material has LUMA accounted for any supplementary interconnection studies costs associated with distributed renewable generators under 25 kilowatts?
I will have to go off of memory to answer your questions. It's part of the category for studies. On one of the I'll use the word enabling categories from a planning perspective. I talked about it yesterday. It's included on that budget. It's all encompassing. Anything that has to do with the planning and studies in my side of the organization.
Are you able to tell us for
The witness may confirm, but I believe the exhibits I mentioned earlier, LUMA 141 and 142 cover, again, these topics. If they may be shown, they're marked as exhibits. Whatever you prefer.
well, do they provide that breakdown for that category, those particular studies, or is it the aggregate studies, which is what I understood Mr. Melendez was referring to?
It talks about both topics, about the technical evaluations included in the and the supplemental studies.
Okay.
So I did answer your question.
Yes.
I did answer your question. And in regards to it, I already answered the question. It's part of that line item, and there's an estimate. It's listed what's included on it. And depending on how many studies are done, right? We calculate basically it's a projection on how many we've done. We have an idea how many interconnection we have every year, and that is what is used as a basis of determining the actual budget.
Thank you. That's all the question I had.
All right, colleagues,
I have a question. Yeah, this is Commissioner Torres. I feel I wrote down this question 10 hours ago, but I just want to ask, Wednesday, Kevin mentioned that there's budget for the vegetation management program, but PREPA is not sending the actual funds for that program, so that program stopped, and it stopped for 6 weeks, and it's going to continue in January. Is that correct?
Objection as to the characterization of PREPA regarding this question.
answer the question to the extent you can. The commissioner is not testifying, so whatever is in his question is not evidence. Mr. Burgermeister, please answer the question to the extent you can.
Yes, what I testified previously was that our planned work had ceased. That's what had stopped in October.
Mhm.
We are continuing with reactive work, which is the on distribution system, dealing with outages, customer outages, and getting them their service restored, plus the helicopter tickets on the transmission system. So
Okay.
that's but it is the planned work under the maintenance program
Mhm.
that has ceased for the past 6 weeks and is planned to be restarted again in January.
Okay, today we spoke about the trenches and the interconnection work that LUMA is doing. Has that been reduced in any way because of lack of actual funding of meeting the budget?
I will say those are prioritized, and to my recollection on this, have not been reduced on the work that is happening.
Okay, why is that? Was that more important than the vegetation management program
I
that was reduced?
would just gonna cautions. We're not talking about prioritization. We're talking about allocation. Okay, one is O&M, the other one is NFC capital, and how it is recovered from customers placed into the role. So I don't want you to feel that I'm making one more important than the other. Is one has to do the funding on O&M, the other one has to do with funding NFC, and also the cost allocation of the trenches has a specific mechanism for doing so. But it is
Okay.
it's being worked on because it has already some funding associated with it and the stages.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, colleagues, let's talk about logistics for a moment, please. I'd like to give us another 10-minute break because I would like us to go till 12:30 today for lunch. Everybody good with that? So we'll take 10 minutes in a moment. First, I'd like to get information about who is going to have how many questions of whom, so we can plan the afternoon. So first of all, there's cross-examination of our two PREB experts that has to occur. And let me ask who is going to have cross-examination of Ms. Bailey and Mr. Judd. Let me see a show of hands, please. Okay, I'm seeing Ms. Mercado, and can you give me a non-binding estimate, please?
Yeah, no more than 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you for that, Ms. Mercado. And then there's cross-examination of the gentlemen who've been speaking today, Mr. Burgermeister and Mr. Melendez. And can I get an estimate of that? Bondholders, please. Mr. Brady, excuse me.
Yes, Corey Brady, National Public Finance Guarantee Corporation, part of the bondholder intervenor group. 15 to 20 minutes probably for Mr. Melendez.
And anything for Mr. Burgermeister today, sir?
No.
Okay, and is there anybody else? Mr. Gonzalez, welcome. Just to be clear to everybody, Mr. Gonzalez notified me this morning that he is taking himself off of the panels and is not asking to be a witness at all, which means he is here strictly as a party. And as a party, he is permitted to ask questions. And as I do with all questioners, I intend to keep them on the scope of the case and ask their questions efficiently. So let me have your estimate, Mr. Gonzalez. Okay, All right, Ms. 1 second, let me make a note. Ms. Mercado.
Yes, there's a pending motion to strike the pre-filed testimony of Mr. Gonzalez. So to clarify, does that mean that that becomes moot?
That is an announcement I intended to make at the end of the day, but I'm making it now that as a result of Mr. Gonzalez's decision to pull him out as a witness, I deem the motion to be withdrawn, and it's one less order I have to write. Are you okay with that, Ms. Mercado?
I am, as long as order is issued to remove that exhibit from the record, because I believe it's been marked testimony, and if
All right.
we can let you know the number.
I will take care of it myself. That much I do know. Is that it, Ms. Mercado?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any parties that wish to do any examination of panelists today? Mr. Fernandez, and what is your estimate, sir?
10 minutes or so? 10 minutes?
Gentlemen, remind me off the record to come back to you about Ms. Courtney Lanes, whether you will agree to examine her remotely. Remember, I have that question pending. Remind me at the break to talk to you about that.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, colleagues, then what time is it now? It is 11:30. I ask that we be back at 11:40, and we will move to the examination. Thank you.
Not from us. Not from us.
I think someone behind us said he might have, I think Mr. Gonzalez said he might have a minute.
I go first. We haven't had cross yet. We haven't had cross yet. Sorry. Okay. Oh, sorry. Is everybody ready?
Yes.
Sorry. That's all right. Everybody ready? Close the door. All right, we'll begin with the examination now. I wrote things down in the order in which they were told to me. Ms. Mercado concerning the Judd Bailey panel, then Mr. Brady with respect to the two gentlemen from Luma, then Mr. Victor Gonzalez, and then Mr. Fernandez or Mr. Fernandez. Is that acceptable, or did you want to prefer a different order? That'd be fine. Why is everybody smiling?
I just understood that you were going to finish with Pedro and we would do redirect and then I would do my cross, but
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first if that's the preference.
We're finished up here. So Mr. Brady, get going. Would you please? Thank you.
I'm already behind. Good morning, Mr. Melendez. For the record, Corey Brady, Weil, Gotchel, and Manges, speaking on behalf of the bondholder group.
Good afternoon.
I'd like you to go back all the way to the first question of the day that Mr. Schiffman asked you. Do you recall that? It was about the status of Tranche 1 renewable projects.
Yep.
The Tranche 1 renewable projects are PPA solar farms, basically, right?
For the most part, yes.
And for the record, PPA is purchase power agreement.
PPA, is that what you said? Yeah, purchase power agreement, yes, for the record. Yes.
So basically, the solar farm sells its output or some part of its output to PREPA.
Yes.
And I wanted to get a little more clarity on the status. I was trying to take notes, but as Mr. Hempling mentioned, you do speak very quickly. So I'm going to try to restate what I heard you say, and if it's wrong, please correct me. I think you said that some of the Tranche 1 projects are being energized. Some have a contract completed but are not yet under construction. Some are delayed, and some are under construction.
Yeah.
Can you give a kind of more quantitative sense of the breakdown of how many fall into those four buckets?
Unfortunately, I cannot answer that with certainty, but I'm going to just help you with one piece, which is that are under contract and under construction, right? There are some that are pending. That's the second part you said. What I did say earlier is the contracting and the construction is happening simultaneously. It's at different stages of all the project. Well, everything else you stated is correct. In regards to the quantities, I don't have it in top of mind. Based on the order, the only piece I think you were asking about delays, right? They are not all coming as original, but when you're talking about execution of projects, they are moving forward. That's what I was communicating this morning.
Okay, so I understand you can't provide a specific breakdown between the buckets, but any sense of, are more than not of them delayed? Are 9 out of 10 about to be energized? Just ballpark.
That's fair question. The majority of them are on schedule or near schedule, so they are moving very well. The ones that are a lot difficult to answer your questions are the ones that doesn't have a finalized contract. In some cases, makes it a little harder because we need access to the funds and all that. But mechanically, a lot of these projects are being built and we're doing our piece. But I'll say the majority of them, we'll say over 50% of them are under construction, moving on schedules, doing very well.
Okay, and do you know if there's somewhere in the rate petition we can look to see a breakdown of all those project statuses?
I'm just going to ask Luma during the next break or somewhere between now and maybe Monday to provide an answer to that question. Is that satisfactory?
Yeah,
that would be great.
Let's do that. I will definitely bring you that. I actually was going to text someone last night about that, and
All right, next question,
Thank you.
please.
And then do you recall Mr. Schiffman asking you about certain federally funded interconnection projects?
yes,
And I think your answer was that they're coming through the pipeline in the next 18 months or something to that effect?
Yep.
What does that mean, coming through the pipeline?
so that's a great clarifying question because I think it's important that it's understood. When we're talking about interconnection process, when I say pipeline is we believe we're seeing a trend of project from when it's submitted all the way through is fully obligated to be within that 18 months that I'm making reference to. So when I say the pipeline, it's somewhere between that 0 and 18 months period, because it was not specifically asking me to specific projects. I mentioned various of them because there are different phases of it.
Okay, so coming through the pipeline does not mean that the project will be complete within 18 months, right?
That is correct.
And it could be some longer period than 18 months.
Okay, yeah, the answer is yes.
Okay. And do you have any sense of how far out beyond 18 months it could go for those projects?
I don't have a sense on that, or because it will be brought, right? It will be brought in statements. We're working on them.
Okay, and then in relation to that line of questioning, you also mentioned an example of a switching station that you said part of it had been energized, but it has not gone commercial. In terms of not going commercial, does that basically mean that solar farm is not feeding energy into the grid yet?
It's a very, very good question because I think I'll help clarify. The switching station is energized, which will allow the hub, the actual, I'll call it backfeed, is being energized, and there's being testing associated with it, and it's going to come online officially very soon. It's part of the sequence in how you do this work. It is putting power, but under that transitional period as part of the testing to ensure conformance. When we talk about commercial, it's when you actually have a specific date from now onward in which obligations of a contract should be met.
Okay, so if, say, it has a 50 megawatt capacity, and I understand it's variable because it's a variable resource, but if it has a 50 megawatt output, it's not actually putting in that full output when the sun is shining.
At this time, until it enters commercial, right? That could be the case, yes.
Okay. And then do you also recall a discussion with Mr. Schiffman about the allocation of federal and non-federal dollars into upgrades related to solar integration?
Yes.
And I believe you said that some of this was related to substation equipment, line capacity, reconfiguration, bringing lines back into service. Those were all examples you gave.
Yes.
So there are NFC or ratepayer dollars being allocated to these upgrade projects.
Well, for those that are applicable, that is correct.
And as we discussed, these are private PPOAs, right? The solar projects.
There are two different things that you just asked. You just comment if I may separate the two.
Sure.
So yes, they are power purchase agreement projects interconnecting to the grid. And yes, there are upgrades to the system that some are related to that and some that are not, that are going to facilitate not just that project, all the other projects that are coming in.
So you're saying some of the upgrades could sort of have dual purposes?
That's correct. That's why I want to help make sure you understood.
Okay. But you would agree that the private solar developers are getting a benefit from those system upgrades, right? It's enabling them to plug their project into the system.
Yeah, in accordance to the order, yes.
Okay. And part of that is being funded by ratepayers for the developers.
I want to paraphrase a little bit on what you're stating to make sure I understood. Part of what are the upgrades in general? The out of service equipment was one example that you just mentioned, right? Well, that has to be done, and they will benefit from that upgrade because the system will come back into configuration.
He's just asking whether the ratepayers are paying for it. That's all he asked.
Yeah, I understood, but I'm answering yes. They're paying for the upgrade that they're benefiting for is different than seeing the benefit of something that we're doing that will allow them to have access. They're two different things, and that's what I'm trying to answer to you.
Okay, so let me try to give you an example to maybe make this more clear. And I am not an engineer, so you'll have the better of me on this example. But my understanding is, let's say you're putting in a 100 megawatt project, right? Mm-hmm. that then needs to be interconnected to the grid, right?
Mhm.
And as a result, you're feeding new. Oh, could you just give an affirmative answer?
Yes,
Not the,
yes.
Yeah, thank you. And so that new power that is being fed into the grid, you basically have to accommodate for that, right?
That is correct.
Because otherwise you could overload the system, bringing in 100 new megawatts in that area.
You're doing great. Yes,
Okay, you could create thermal issues, right? Overheating lines.
you got it.
Voltage violations.
You were listening.
Frequency
Yes.
fluctuations.
Yes.
Okay. And so in order for that project to come online, those upgrades need to happen, or else it's not going to work, right? Or it's going to hurt the system.
Or else the things that you just listed will actually be in existence, and that's reliability issues. Yes.
And nobody wants that, right? The
No.
developer doesn't want that. Their project won't be working right.
Yeah.
So when you do those upgrades, it does benefit the developer, right?
Yes.
Okay. Has Luma considered trying to allocate those upgrade costs to the developers instead of the ratepayers?
So from a technical perspective, I'm going to answer the question technically, right? That is a commercial question that you're asking. There's some laws that we're abiding to be able to integrate that. And we talk about two examples. We talk about the examples and when we were directed to do it through FEMA. And there is another one that is indeed what we're doing, that the impact of the upgrades shall be identified and will by the developers on some of these projects. So what you're saying, shall we pursue it? The answer is yes.
Okay, so sometimes yes, sometimes no, if I'm understanding you.
If you're understanding me correctly, based on the orders and the rules and regulations, yes.
So are you saying that the question of how to allocate those costs is not a matter of Luma discretion, it's entirely a matter of law?
That is correct.
Next question.
Okay, so moving a little bit later in Mr. Shipman's questioning, do you recall discussing deployment of battery storage to help with generation issues?
Yes.
And I think you said something to the effect that there's a pipeline of project for adding batteries to the existing solar projects.
Yes.
Thank you. And you said in some cases it depends on the contract, whether they're being integrated or something to that effect.
Yes.
Could you just give a little more detail around what is the timeline of that process? Where are you in the timeline? What capacities are coming online in terms of battery storage?
Oh, okay. Okay. So you may have seen that on some of the filings, some of the ROIs in regards to some examples of aggregated over 400 megawatts in one project for one developer. There are others at 100 megawatts and another ones that are 50. We have 24 different locations that are 25. So you can see a little bit of the aggregate. And I'll give you an order of magnitude of the things that we're seeing, plus and minus about 800 megawatts total, 1,200 depending on the stages of these process. The first part of your question is stages in the process and where we are with them. They are all in different stages on evaluation. It could be anything as a perspectives all the way as to we're building it, we're doing engineering for it. The grouping of them, I cannot answer that at this second. That's your next question.
Yes, it was. I was going to ask if you could maybe add that to the timeline document you were doing for tranche one, also the battery storage.
Just 1 second. Got it.
Thank you. And then later, Mr. Schiffman asked you about when you would be doing dynamic studies to determine battery storage. Do you recall that?
Yeah, he was asking on the sequence. Yes, I recall that.
And I heard you to say that you have an internal expectation of when you would be doing this, but that there were also other factors outside.
I did say that, yes.
Yeah. So what is your internal expectation?
In regards to when they get studied and we're integrating I'm going to repeat the question back. You refer to the dynamic studies.
Yes, I
Right.
believe Mr. Shipman asked when you would be
That
doing them.
when it will be. So dynamic studies are always done. And I want to get specifically what I answered of him, which is the same question you're asking. We have some detailed information that we need to improve our dynamic studies for more flexible resources in storage. We will be, as we get the data that we need, then we will roll out that program. We do not have the data, so it's contingent to external resources on that.
Mhm.
And within that calendar year, we'll actually do additional studies and continue on. To help you frame this, we do annual studies and then we do upon request studies.
Yes, thank you. I understood that answer, that you were waiting on outside information. I'm really just zeroing in on, you said you have an expectation internally of when you would be doing this. And so I'm just asking you, what is that internal expectation?
Within a year, and that's what I said, within a year, right after
Within a
we're
year.
done with receiving that information, I expect that to be fully completed.
So it's whenever that date is plus 1 year.
That is correct. But, I'll try to clarify, we're doing dynamic studies now.
Okay. But basically you're saying you receive the information whenever that might be, 6 months from now, whenever, and then your internal expectation is that it will take another year on top of that to do the studies. Right?
No more than a year, that's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you. And then do you recall a discussion around the policy of reaching 100% renewables by 2050?
Yes, I recall having that discussion, yes.
Okay. And you mentioned that these were basically guardrails that determined your planning in order to reach that objective,
They
right?
could be used as one of the guardrails, right? Regulatory public policy.
Okay. And you said there was uncertainty and that was basically affecting your planning process, right?
I did say that, yes.
Okay. And was the uncertainty that you were referring to whether that 2050 mandate could change?
Is that what are we using? I actually use that as an example.
Yeah, because it changed before, right?
Correct.
All of the interim deadlines up to 2050 were recently eliminated.
You're correct.
And so it's possible that 2050 date could be pushed out to 2060 or some other date.
It's possible, yes.
And that's what's affecting your planning process.
Yes.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Sir, please, yes.
That in your planning, you take into account laws and regulation.
Yes.
So the 2050, 100% renewable still stands.
Yes.
So you are considering that in your planning.
Yes, I am considering that.
So just to clarify your last question, it's not supposed to not be using that goal in his analysis. Because he answered that, well, I'm not sure that can be pushed. So I don't know. No, you are supposed to consider that in your analysis.
With
correct.
If I may, when there is a law, we use it.
Yeah, perfect.
That's correct.
And it's still the law.
That is correct.
Perfect.
You're you're treating the 2050 as a given.
Yes, it's a law.
Okay. Mr. Hernandez, it's your turn. Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Mr. Brady.
Thank you. Mr. Melendez, good morning.
Morning.
No, you can see me.
Yes, I can see you. Go ahead.
Okay. Before the break, you were asked about the impact of a proposed bill that's making its way through the legislature, and you were asked to do certain review. Can you summarize for me what is that you're doing in order to respond to a question about the bill that may or may not be approved?
So I'm going to repeat it back to you in regards to the understanding back, which essentially there are some costs that are in the proposed filing or rate case for 3 years
Okay.
of $40+ million.
Okay.
The question, as I understood from the commissioner, was to determine or potentially determine what will be the change with the law in regards to what will be incurred by ratepayers and what wouldn't, from what we actually have in the budget.
Okay, understood. I don't know if you're aware of another bill that's making its way through the legislature right now. It was approved by the House yesterday. It would stay the rate case proceedings. Could you tell me, or could you do an analysis as to the impact of that stay of the proceedings in terms of what does that do to your operations, the impact of that?
Objection states a fact not in evidence and misrepresents because there is no bill, there was a resolution.
That's one objection. Let's
Compound.
hear the other objection.
Yeah,
Okay, let's
Correct.
hear the next objection.
Yes, I agree.
it was a compound question
Okay,
and the foundation has not
I'm-
been laid with it.
I'm not allowing the question. What is the next question, please? The witness-
I just
One
asked
second.
that question to make the point about my earlier statement regarding the bill that hasn't passed, yet we're making an analysis based on that.
Once again, objection. There is no bill that was presented.
It's argumentative.
First of all, let's try to avoid two people talking at once. I believe that both the translators and the reporters are beyond superhuman. They're interpreting acronyms without our giving them the words. They're dealing with two languages, 14 accents, and two people that either come from New Jersey or sound like they came from New Jersey. And with that, we'll go on to the next question, Mr. Fernandez, if you have it.
Okay, Mr. Melendez, are you familiar with power purchase and operating agreements?
I am familiar.
You are? Could you confirm for me that there is an appendix in there that's called for solar projects, minimum technical requirements?
I am familiar with that, sir, yes.
Okay. When you came into Luma, do you know if Luma, first off, MTRs predate Luma's coming into the picture, right?
Yes.
Okay. When Luma started working in Puerto Rico, do you know if Luma made an independent review of the MTRs?
I can't attest to that. Don't have that information in front of me. No, I don't have knowledge of that right now. Could not, I don't know.
Okay. So perhaps Luma accepted what PREPA had prepared and continued on with it?
It calls for speculation. Objection.
Wait, can you repeat the question? I'll answer it.
Let me hear the question again, and I've got the objection in mind. Let me hear the question again, please, Mr. Fernandez.
So I said perhaps Luma adopted the PREPA MTRs and continued with it.
And I'll say perhaps, and I would agree with the perhaps, yes.
Well, I don't know. I don't even know what the value evidentiarily is that. What is it that you were aware of?
So what I'm hearing from him is they are MTRs, minimum technical requirements that were established prior to Luma's arrival. And the question on the table is whether or not we're adopting them, we're moving forward with them as is, or there were any revisions associated with it. I could tell you that I know my team knows them, which means my team has reviewed them. Personally, have not reviewed them, nor I can attest to whether or not there've been modifications to it. But we understand them, we apply them, and according to what's active at the time and approved.
Thank you. Next question.
Okay. So are you aware of any effort by Luma to perhaps determine if there's a right sizing to be approached to the MTRs?
So I'm going to answer those questions a little bit on like the things that we should always do in the context of which you always review policies in accordance to the directions of the commissioners on the laws to ensure that they're adaptable. So we always should be able to review these technical requirements. So yes.
Are you aware of any effort of that kind is ongoing right now?
I can't recollect that right now. I don't know specifically there is. I know that my team has been asked, but you're being very specific as to there is a specific task force or something. I do not know that.
Okay. No further questions.
Mr. Gonzalez. Thank you, Mr. Fernandez.
Good morning. For the record, it's Victor Gonzalez.
Into the microphone, please, sir.
For the record, it's Victor Gonzalez. Can I first ask the questions of Mr.
You have Mr. Melendez and Mr. Melendez, and you have Mr. Burgermeister.
Mr. Burgermeister.
And the topic is the integration of renewable energy into the transmission system planning and reconductoring and restoration process. Go ahead, sir.
But you mentioned
One moment, please. Let me hear from Ms. Chambers. Welcome, Ms. Chambers.
Good morning. Mr. Burgermeister hasn't testified on this topic.
Well, I haven't heard the question yet, so let's find out what the question is. As I've said before, and I hope I don't have to say it again, the scope of this case is determined by the just and reasonable standard under the statute. It's not determined by what applicants strategically intend to place within their pre-filed testimony. What's relevant is what's relevant under the statute. Of course, if a question is unfair, I'll outrule it. Mr. Gonzalez, continue, please.
it's about vegetation management, so
All right, well,
I
let's go.
thought he was going to talk about vegetation management.
Go ahead with your question, sir.
Can I ask the question?
Yes, go ahead, please. And hold on. The reason why I'm doing this is, of course, it's more tidy to have the questions about veg management at the time of that discussion, but there was a change in Mr. Gonzalez's status, and I'm not going to hold that against him, and so I'm going to let him ask these questions. Mr. Gonzalez, continue.
Just a note of clarification. When yesterday you said licensed arborist, do you mean by it Puerto Rico Department of Natural Resources licensed arborist?
Yes, that is my understanding, and not all of our arborists at this point are licensed, as what I mentioned yesterday, but we do have adequate number of licensed arborists, and we also have our contractors.
You don't have to go back over yesterday's conversation. That was excellent, but he was just asking the question about the status. Next question, please.
Okay. How many of these Puerto Rico Department of Natural Resources licensed arborists do you have on your payroll?
I couldn't give you that exact number right now.
Can you give a general number?
Hundreds,
dozens, three or four?
3 or 4.
Next question, please.
Do the Puerto Rico Department of Natural Resources licensed arborists on your payroll design and supervise your vegetation management, and also the vegetation management that you subcontract or that the municipalities do?
Yes. One clarification there. You mentioned municipalities. At this point, we do not have municipalities conducting vegetation work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Very helpful. Next on my list is Ms. Mercado or Ms.
I did mention that I had 2 minutes for him.
Go ahead.
And 15 minutes for.
I apologize, Mr. Gonzalez. Please continue.
Please excuse my English. I would prefer to talk to you in Spanish because I understand that you speak Spanish, but I will stick to English because it'll make things easier. But I apologize ahead of time for my broken English.
No,
okay?
no apologies necessary. Si tienes que hablar español, lo puedes hacer.
Just for the benefit of the other ones, I think it'll be better for they to suffer through my English. Okay.
He's going to ask his questions in English. Go ahead, Mr. Gonzalez, please.
Maybe we should change to Spanish because I guess my English doesn't get across.
Mr. Gonzalez, let's get the questions going, please. Mr. Gonzalez, it wasn't a substantive answer. Even I could tell that. Mr. Gonzalez, continue, please.
Mr. Melendez, do you know if the existing renewable energy projects paid for the upgrades needed for them to interconnect.
You're talking about all projects or?
Renewable energy projects that are currently operating, did they or did they not pay for all the upgrades to the SCADA, to the transmission centers, to the lines that were required by PREPA for them to interconnect, and also for all the studies?
Victor, if it has to do with any service assets prior to my existence or my knowledge, I cannot answer that question because I do not know that to be a fact. So I do not know that to be the case.
What about the ones that were within your tenure?
So the one that is coming in online, they're governed by the current policies that are existing. That's the answer to my questions.
Next question.
When you say the current policy, do you mean, as you previously said, the law that obligates LUMA to pay for the upgrades that benefit a specific renewable energy project?
When I set policy, I meant all laws, all policies that apply that are current, and that's what we're following for all projects.
Is a policy and a law the same thing?
You don't have to answer that. Next question.
So can you tell me what is the law that you were referring to that obligates you to provide for free to a specific renewable energy project the cost of interconnection?
Objection,
Yeah.
misstating the prior testimony.
Got it. What he said is that whatever he's bound by, whether it's a commission rule or whether it's a statute, he's obeying it. He's not going to be able to identify by provision in statutes or rule what it is that he's following. He's got lawyers that help him do that. Next question, please.
Are you familiar with ATR?
Right now it's an acronym, so I'm not.
Alternate technical requirements.
Now I understand. Yeah, I heard the term before, but
You don't deal with ATRs at LUMA?
so that's what let me help you, Victor, to answer your question. Within my organization, there is the planning and engineering part of the organization. There's also the operations side of the organization.
I'm very familiar. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I have a limited amount of
Okay.
time, and I think Mr. Hemphill will cut me off. So I understand what PREPA is.
Okay, understand.
Because I've been dealing with it for 25 years.
Right.
Okay, I know a little bit about it. Okay, we have ATRs, alternate technical requirements, and those provide the project. The project can choose between putting the batteries for ramp or putting the batteries for frequency.
Objection, misstates states facts that are not in evidence in this proceeding.
Okay. So just 1 second, please. Are you familiar with alternative technical requirements?
I'm familiar with what
Okay.
he's making reference to. I'm
1 second,
trying to get
please.
to a question.
All right, I'm going to ask you the question. Do you take alternative technical requirements into account in your work?
Everything that is active and is enforceable is utilized.
Okay, does that include alternative technical
Everything that is
requirements?
enforceable and active is used.
Okay, what's your next question, sir?
Is it correct that it has a choice of either frequency or ramp?
It like all projects, I don't know the details because I haven't personally read the documentations, sir, and I'm on their oath attesting to this. But I could tell you is within my organization, there are people who address this and they assessed in accordance to what the policy is.
So the answer to his question was yes.
Yes.
Okay,
He's
well,
asking if I do it.
Sorry?
He asked if I do it personally.
Well,
No,
you can assume he means people you are under your tutelage. Mr. Gonzalez, continue, please.
So you're also familiar with MTRs, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so why don't the MTRs also provide that choice?
I'll say when you're asking me the why, is a broad response. I think it could.
Okay,
Okay,
well,
thank you. You answered my question. So MTRs could have that choice.
that's what he
It
said.
will not affect the integrity of the system.
Objection,
Now,
argumented.
1 second, please.
Argumented.
Ms. Mercado, sometimes a witness expresses a question with a certain amount of passion and sometimes a period instead of a question mark. But if it's relevant, it's still a question. And do you understand the question?
Can you repeat it again, sir?
Yeah. Without the passion, just with the words, it'll help.
So from what I heard from you is that it's your belief that the MTRs could also offer a choice of using those batteries, like the ATR batteries, for either frequency or for ramp.
I'll say from a technical perspective, you're answering your question respectfully. What you're stating is whatever is applicable is utilized in the regulations. When you apply to a specific project, to a specific needs and the contract and commercial, all those elements also need to be included. So I don't want to be biased or unbiased to any.
Okay, so ATRs, as we established, have a choice between frequency and ramp, but MTRs require both of them. But it was your statement that MTRs could act like ATRs and also offer that choice, right?
Like I said, in the way you're phrasing the question, right? Of those in existence could be utilized, and the answer, just having a conversation, yes, I understand your question. The answer is could, all right, and
Just some of them have already been asked. If you just give me
Of
a
course,
second,
I
because I
understand
need,
that.
I'm slow.
No, you're not slow.
And I don't want to get,
You're fine, sir.
Okay.
You're being very efficient, and I appreciate it.
When Commissioner Mateo was asking, and Commissioner, we're asking you about the batteries, right? Luma is installing batteries, right? Are those batteries for what? What will be their function?
ancillary services.
Which ancillary services?
It could be frequency support. It could be ramp rate support, as whatever.
Can a battery that does frequency support also do ramp support, just to use a lay term?
So that's a separate question, I'm assuming, right? Then
Yeah,
the one you just asked. I mean, but the batteries have different applications. Yes.
Okay, so the ones that you're installing, you mean that they can do both frequency support, ancillary service, but they also could do the ancillary service of ramp control.
What I'm answering when you use the word could, because it has not been finalized and designed, is a future statement of what it could be doing. And the answer is yes, sir.
Okay, and the batteries that Genera is installing, and you did say here that you were in conversations with Genera regarding those batteries and interconnecting those batteries. That is correct. Right?
That Luma, as an organization, is, yeah.
When I say you,
Understood. Understood. Yes.
But I can say Luma. But if I forget, take no offense that I said you instead of.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So the ones that Genera is installing that are being paid by federal funds, which is the cheapest way for the clients of viewers to have them. What do they do?
Objection as to the argument. Yes, that it be stricken.
Okay, sorry. What do they do?
I apologize, Victor, but I do not have the details to be able to answer that question.
Will they do frequency?
Like I said, Victor, I really don't have the details. I will be speculating for anything that I say in regards to that project.
You mentioned that you had discussed interconnecting them. Do you interconnect an ancillary service that does frequency differently from an ancillary service that does ramp?
So Victor, if I may, when I discussed the Luma was working on it, it's not that I'm personally having this conversation. I do not have the details of the projects to answer what you're asking me.
But then on a general theme, based on your knowledge, which you have said, and everybody I think believes you are an expert on this, does a battery energy storage system of the magnitudes that are being installed, okay, do they have to have a certain, as you mentioned, configuration for them to be able to provide frequency support?
In the context of technicality, of technical expectations, yes, you can specify to do both. That's what you're asking me, yeah.
They can do both, or they can do either?
They can do both, either. You can set up the system, whichever way. You have to be careful, right, in how you utilize them, and also the type of technology that is being deployed, the type of controls that you're utilizing. You can separate it.
Yes, okay,
Because when we're talking,
I understand that. Okay, now
okay,
the existing projects that have NTR requirements, they basically have 180 megawatts of capacity. And the NTR requirements were for 10% of that capacity. So they have batteries.
Hold on, Mr. I want to be careful about it. It's often useful to premise a question with some factual premises, but I want to make sure that when we're doing that, the witness has a chance to affirm his understanding of those premises so that we're breaking up the question. It's also easier when we're on the witness stand just to absorb things. And that way I don't get an objection that you're testifying or arguing. Are we clear with that? So could you start again and just, take it in pieces like a good meal? Go ahead.
Okay. So the existing operating renewable energy projects that are interconnected to the grid are approximately 180 megawatts.
Is that right?
he's making a statement, so let's assume that happens to be the case.
And the NTRs require 10% of that capacity to be provided for ramp and frequency support by the battery energy storage system.
That's a question.
Assumes facts that are not in evidence.
He's asking the witness.
I'll answer.
Yeah. Hold on one second. Ms. Mercado, give me a chance to handle this. I think I know what the concerns are. If you find that I foul up, you jump up and you correct me, okay?
Yeah.
It'll be faster that way. Go ahead, please.
So Victor, with all the respect, I want to repeat back your questions. You're speaking of specifics of an asset that is operating, which is not the area of my expertise, but I'll be happy to answer the leading questions you get into it. So please, let's keep going so I can help you understand.
Yeah, I'm just trying to clarify what the two commissioners were asking.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Continue on. Yes, I know where you're going with it. So let's do it so they can hear from you as an expert. Yeah.
So it's 10 megawatts of battery energy storage that they have. You mentioned that you were doing 4 of 25, which is 100, and the ones that Genera are doing are 600. So we're going to have now 700 megawatts of battery energy storage that are going to do the ramp and frequency that is now also being done by these less than 20 megawatts that are on the operating PPOs. That is correct, right?
So what's the question? Do you understand that?
Yeah, I understand.
All right, go. Just go.
So yes, so long the resources get designed and they're operating and meet the operating requirements, you will actually have those resources available in the future. Yes.
So will it be fair to say that if you have now in progress a capacity that will represent 20 times, 20 and 40 times what is existing, is it relevant to have the NTR's storage requirement on the PPOAs?
I do not agree with that. And this is the relevancy of it immediately. I'll say, I think we're making it irrelevant because we're trying to interconnect it to an existing asset. I respect your point, but I will technically jump in and say, you can't say it's irrelevant. I could say, help where you're getting to, we need to study it, we need to integrate it, and we need to make sure we maximize it, which is what the Commissioner Mateo was referring to. That we can say in a prospective way, but to declare them irrelevant is not technically correct.
Okay. The other questions that I have here is you mentioned that renewable energy was generating challenges to your distribution system. Is that correct?
I'll repeat it back on how I stated to help you with this. The renewable resources that have been installed in the distribution system have created some challenges.
Okay. And you also mentioned that this distribution generation system had issues with lack of equipment and with non-operative equipment.
Correct.
Struggling with your questions because I don't know
Okay,
where
he doesn't
it was.
remember that. Why don't you get to your actual question?
Well, my actual question is, are these challenges just as a result of the renewable energy system going into the feeders, or are these feeders already so out of whack, so out of code, that it really is indifferent what you do with them?
I was expecting an objection, but
Well, I would like the answer to the question. So if there's an objection, I'm overruling it, but I'd like to see what you can do with it.
So I think you're departing from an assumption and a premise is that the existing conditions has anything to do with the impact that these resources are having, and that I don't think is appropriate and correct. That's the answer. And
next question.
But how much federal funds, how many billions of federal funds have you requested or have been allocated to fix these feeder lines?
Objection, compound question.
So I'll give it a chance to parse the question, sir.
Answer the part of the question that you remember, and we'll see what's left.
So I think you were specific. I want to repeat it back. It's specific to the distribution system
Yeah,
and associated.
feeder lines are in the distribution system,
I
right?
just want
Mr. Gonzalez, let him get to an answer.
I'm
please.
just trying to get through it. I suggest that you look a little bit on the reporting that has been made to the PREP on how much we have invested in federal funds in the distribution system. That will be a more exact answer. I cannot come forward and give you a direct association of that coupled with the distribution energy resources, because I do not have that number in the hand.
I mean, I was asking the number.
Just ask the question.
The question is, these feeder systems need to be completely rebuilt. Isn't that correct?
That is incorrect. That is an assumption that you're making on all pieces of equipment, and that is not correct.
So I read that we need $10 billion to be able to put the current feeder
Just ask a
system.
question, Mr. Gonzalez. Never mind your thoughts. You can put them in your post-hearing brief. What is your question, sir?
My question is, isn't it true that all these feeders need to be rebuilt, regardless of whether you put renewable energy?
It's not true.
He's already answered that question.
Already answered that question.
He's
So
answered
you do
that.
not need federal funds to renew something because you don't need to renew it.
Objection.
1 second, everybody. Let me hear that last question, Mr. Gonzalez, so I can make a proper ruling without being interrupted. Go ahead, sir. What was the last? Is there a question? Or
If the feeders are in operation, then you don't need federal funds to.
all right, well, sir,
Getting within code, you don't need federal funds to fix them, right?
Ms. Mercado, I've got it. The premise of your question is a premise that Mr. Melendez, I apologize, already rejected. Is there another question, sir?
Yes, 1 second. It's just a few more and then.
Okay, I appreciate every effort that you're making to bring us the education that we need.
For all these projects, renewable energy projects that are in the queue, all these studies that LUMA is doing, are they being back charged to the projects?
In accordance to the policy and the regulations, they are part of the facility studies. Whatever applies, it will apply, yes.
Are they being charged?
I'm going to say it again. System studies and sympathetic studies, so they're covered under the law, depending on the type of project, because I have to be careful on how I answer this question.
He's testified multiple times that whatever the law requires, LUMA is following.
Do you, will the money spent, whether it's federal funds or LUMA funds, which are ratepayers funds, will those monies spent will they be stranded if these are renewable energy projects that are going to be integrated to the transmission system never happen?
Well, that's definitional. The answer, I can answer that one. The answer is yes. If you build something and nobody shows up, it's stranded. What's the next question? Right, Mr. Melendez?
Yes, sir.
Okay, next question, please.
So would it be then wise that those built but nobody came cost, okay, be borne exclusively by the project that made you incurred into them and not by the federal funds or the ratepayers funds?
That question lies outside Mr. Melendez's technical expertise. It's a policy question and a legal question, an excellent question, but it's not for Mr. Melendez to answer. Next question.
I'm almost finished.
I'm not trying to rush you. Everybody else is, though. How many more do you have, sir?
Maybe not many. Let me just, can I just?
Okay, just take a moment.
I don't have a back office.
No, I understand. Neither do I. That's so I know the feeling.
Okay. Another subject that you went into, Mr. Melendez, was this, let's say, the duck curve, right? As they said in California.
Okay, one second. We are not going to have questions on the duck curve.
Well, he mentioned, I'm just using it to say what he's placed about the problem that he was facing with the dynamic ramping of 300 megawatts.
Okay, I'll tell you what we're going to do
Talk
because
about that.
yes, sir. I did promise we would stop at 12:30, and so this is what we're going to do. I know there's probably two urges that people have. One is to complete this line of questions. The other is to eat. I could ask for a show of hands. How many would like to stay for what? Another 5 minutes, Mr.
Maybe a couple of minutes, just 2 questions.
Okay, well, let's finish up then. It's just a few minutes, and then we'll take our break and we'll follow lunch with Luma's counsel questioning the PREB consultants. I'm sorry, sir. Well, you have one question of. Okay, well, let's get Mr. Gonzalez and see where we stand on the clock. Try to do it, Mr. I'm not going to treat you differently from anybody else, sir. I rush everybody, but go ahead.
And this problem that you are facing, right? Will that problem, you sort of hinted that this problem at renewable energy might be causing it.
Just get to the question, sir.
Could that be alleviated, or could that problem, that situation be reduced if there will be time of use rates?
I'm going to repeat it back.
I'm going to object. The foundation has not been laid to ask a question over rates to this.
There's something that's useful about the question. This witness, just very briefly, this witness is in charge of planning and spending a lot of money. And the question is, if you had information, if they were rate designs that changed people's conduct so that they were responding to financial incentives to do less during peak periods, would it make a difference?
He's asking me a professional perspective, and I'll give it to him.
Go ahead.
So if I may, I could answer his questions.
Go,
No,
sir.
not an issue. Let's not interrupt. I want to give him the time he deserves. Okay. So the time of use of energy does impact how you actually have to design and the dynamics of the system. So the answer is yes. The time of use and when the energy is consumed has something to do with it. So in turn, what you are referring to, yeah, you can infer that if you change the behaviors of the consumptions of the users, you'll be able to address part of these challenge.
Right.
Thank you very much. I have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. I had the same experience 10 years ago. Your questions are always useful, and your background as an engineer, as a business person. I'm sorry?
I'm not an engineer.
You could have fooled
I
me.
am let's say a Department of Natural Resources licensed arborist. That's
Okay.
the only title that I have.
All right, thank you very much. We do have his biography. We had just slipped into the record, Ms. Mercado and Ms. Chambers. I hope you won't sue me for that. We have just a few brief questions from OIPC. Mr. Vasquez Melendez, please.
Good morning, Mr. Melendez, Attorney Pedro Vasquez on behalf of the OIPC. I'm going to address Exhibit 2.05 of LUMA. Yes. Line 73. The title is DG Interconnect and net metering is part of the compliance and studies.
Yep.
Are those studies? What type of studies are they included in that in the part of non-federal funded?
That's a great question. Appreciate it. So when you add an asset, it's part of the DG interconnection to the facility, you identify the flow, because when you're adding a energy producing resource like a rooftop solar that gets injected into the system was not originally designed to do that. So what you're studying is when you are doing that, are you affecting the transformer? Are you affecting the conductor? Are you affecting from a capacity? Those is what it gets assessed. Also affects voltage. Over voltage conditions are created, and the reverse goes through. And lastly, it's a little technical, but it might help you understand. Power to move between point A to point B is very necessitate reactive resources. So that is also part of the study on how the movement of power, so it doesn't affect any other element. Some of the things that you will actually study, and then power quality. Will that have a complications because it's an inverter-based resource? Would you have any impact on the quality of the power that that particular customer is receiving, or those that are connected to the grid?
Is part of what you have described part of the supplemental studies that is made when the DG is interconnected?
Yes, sir.
So is there any difference between one or the other?
It's the extent of the study, right? What is covered in the supplemental study is specific to a DG. There's a scope of that, so I don't have it memorized, so I apologize for that. But there might be differences that versus a new load, which is the other part of your question that is in that budget. Then when you're connecting load, it's not different than when you're connecting a generation resource at the distribution level.
My purpose go specifically with the study, and they're supposed to be paid by the DG proponents. So is that money is supposed to be then billed to those clients?
I will answer these questions with the knowledge that I have, but I'm not the person who does the billing, but it is basically part of the process and rules and regulations that we follow. This will actually have to be recovered.
So sort of it is similar to what we talked before the break regarding the improvement to the system, right?
Yep. The rules, regulations, and procedures and all that, it's all part of that conversation.
And those studies shouldn't be done if no DG is going to be interconnected. So there are specifically the reason why those studies are being made.
The cause of them, the reason why they're done is what you just said. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Colleagues, thank you for a productive morning. So I've got 12:41. Since we had such a long morning, why don't we take a little bit longer lunch, full 75 minutes this time. So we'll see you back at 5 minutes to 2. 5 minutes to 2. At that time, LUMA's counsel will question the panelists who are the PREB consultants. 1 minute, please, not 7th grade. Number 2, then I think I will then do the veg management contract questions, but I may have to check with my distant colleague, Mr. Tim and see if he needs to go before me on enabling and support. I don't know that yet. I hope that doesn't bother too many people. Ms. Mercado.
Yes, I have redirect for Mr. Melendez.
Okay, well, we'll make sure you do that, but we're not going to do it now. But
No, after in the afternoon, just to budget that time.
you could sit here and do it by yourself if you
I've
want.
been waiting. I've been waiting for a while.
Okay.
It's quite.
I'm glad we're keeping our sense of humor because we can all use it. Okay, I'll see you back at 5 minutes to 2. Thank you so much.